shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you on this beautiful Tuesday morning. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me. Lots and lots and lots, as always, to talk about, both at home and abroad. I'm with you all the way till 1 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great, as I say, to have your company. Coming up in this hour, Canadians. You get what you're paid for. Mark Carney's Liberals have won the election in Canada overnight in a major political comeback for a party that were far behind in the polls just a few months ago. The campaign was fuelled by Donald Trump's annexation threats and trade war. Speaking after the result, Mr Carney warned that Trump was trying to break Canada and that he would fight back. Well, you're welcome to him, Canada. At least he's not our Bank of England governor anymore. That's what I said. Plus, Donald Trump today marks his 100th day in office. Some might say it feels longer, some might say he hasn't done enough. Well, Downing Street has drafted a proposed joint statement with the EU rejecting some of the US president's key policies, including backing for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Big up to that. The Paris Climate Agreement, wah, wah, and free trade. Yeah, big up for that. They're right on some things, people. Plus, a heavy reliance on net zero energy left Spain and Portugal vulnerable to the mass blackouts engulfing the region yesterday. That's according to energy experts. Europe's largest power cut ever saw tens of millions of people left without electricity. Flights were grounded, trains halted, and whole cities, including capital cities of Madrid and Lisbon, were left without any power at all, internet access or other vital services. It's amazing how much you rely on electricity for, eh? I have to say, if this was down to something else, I think you'd be finding there'd be a lot more coverage of this story. Anyway, all of that coming up, plenty more besides. Joining me for all the chat today is Benjamin Butterworth, who's a journalist and broadcaster. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, you and I, we're barely ever not in the country. I'm surprised you're not in Spain or Portugal enjoying a blackout right now.
Do you know, I had to laugh that the Prime Minister of Spain gave a televised address to explain the blackout, and I thought, well, who's got the television on? There's no electricity.
Well, apparently most people in Spain and Portugal didn't know there was a big national blackout until they got the electricity back, and then they were able to find out from family and friends and things. Yeah. Again, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? People go, oh, well, I'll use my mobile phone, except you can't charge it. And, of course, a lot of the telecoms communications weren't up either. Before we get to that, and indeed Mark Carney and all of the stories, I just want to put out the question to you today. And as you know, you're always welcome to get in touch on any topic. Let's face it, I told you what you're allowed to talk about. You just tell me, no, we're going to talk about this anyway. You get to talk about what you want. Always welcome all your calls. But in particular, I'd like to hear from you about Donald Trump's 100th day in office. That is today, inaugurated on the 20th January. I mean, the man got straight to work that day. I mean, he was just signing those executive orders one after the other, wasn't he, on stage? So I want to know, what are his biggest achievements so far? What are his biggest mistakes so far? Try not to have Trump derangement syndrome in either direction, either everything he does is perfect and everything he does is awful. Let's be sensible about this. What are his biggest achievements? What has he done that, my God, you'd love emulated here? And what do you think his biggest mistakes are? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. You can get in touch on X at TalkTV as well. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. And we'll come to that with Benjamin Butterworth just a moment. First up there, let's talk about that overnight news. Mark Carney, former Bank of England governor here, former governor of the Canadian National Bank as well. He's won the Canadian election for the Liberals. It has to be said, this is the most extraordinary turnaround for the Liberal Party in the doldrums under Justin Trudeau, who's just beyond awful. And again, he's wrong on even more things than Mark Carney. Quite an achievement for a politician. It was looking like Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives were just going to walk it. They were 20 points ahead, no problem at all. Then Donald Trump came in at the beginning of his 100 days, started talking about Canada being the 51st state, imposing these trade tariffs, massively punitive trade tariffs on Canada. And what a surprise, Mark Carney gets elected as leader and everything changes. Did Mark Carney win this election? Did Pierre Poilievre lose the election? Or was it Donald Trump who basically decided this election?
Well, I mean, I think Donald Trump probably was the distinctive factor. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, for context, the Conservatives were 20 points ahead, and it looks like the Liberals, Mark Carney's party, has won by 11 points.
That's huge.
I mean, that's a third of the population changing their mind in a couple of months.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch must be looking at this and going, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh.
It's the kind of thing that, had it happened 12 months earlier, I think Rishi Sunak and the Tories would have thought maybe they had a chance, because this is as dramatic the Liberals were as behind as the Tories and Rishi Sunak were.
I mean, they have had massive upsets before, haven't they, where a party that's had a massive majority wiped out.
Yeah, the Conservatives, I think at the start of the 90s, was it? So it is extraordinary. And what's also extraordinary is the idea that Donald Trump saved Davos man Mark Carney.
I know.
You know, everything that he rails against is what Mark Carney represents.
Do you think he secretly wanted that? He didn't want... I mean, people talk about Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, who seems very sane at all and not at all Trumpist. They go, oh, he supports sort of Trump policies. But he said, no, I mean, not being completely mad and woke it doesn't make you Donald Trump. But Donald Trump effectively, he brought in the man who he kind of opposes the most. But do you think he kind of secretly wanted that?
Well, it's interesting because yesterday on Election Day, Donald Trump put out a long post on Truth Social saying, let's make Canada the 51st state and it'll be fantastic in our hands. And you couldn't help but think that's only going to drive Canadians towards the Mark Carney argument. Not
that Pierre Poilievre was saying, they've taken exactly the same stance in terms of we're not going to be... We're never going to be the 51st state. I mean, it's completely unsecured border. It's the longest unsecured border in the world.
It's the longest border in the world.
Yeah, the Americans are... I've had that in a quiz question before. Yeah. The Americans are not going to invade Canada.
No, but I think it's fascinating. Much of my family is Canadian, and I don't think they've ever loved being mistaken for Americans, as sometimes people do. They would rather be mistaken for Brits than Americans. They're nearer us.
I have to say, it's one of my little personal games is when I realise someone's Canadian is pretending I think they're American.
Basically,
just for the sake of it.
I mean, no offence, but if it's not a whiny accent, it's probably a Canadian one. That's kind of a good rule of thumb. But what's really interesting, if you listen to what Mark Carney said this morning, he talked about how the world has fundamentally changed. The era of lower boundaries and closer integration between countries post-World War II is over. Now, given the context that he is a global banker and is very experienced in that system, for him to be saying that, and for a leader, akin to our own to be saying that, it's quite extraordinary just how different the language is compared to European and British leaders.
I've got to be honest with you, I just don't believe a single word that Mark Carney says. Here's a man who completely, basically sided with the establishment on Brexit and made... But Bank of England got outrageously, as an independent bank governor, outrageously involved in the Brexit debate, pushed out a load of abject lies that made predictions in terms of what happened to our economy. He then went on to be sort of a big campaigner on climate change issues. He's an international banker. He's part of the problem, not part of the solution, I would say to most people. And perfectly nice man. I mean, I would say our kids were at the same school for some years, but he turns up to sports day. He's a good dad. I've got no personal animus, but wrong about everything. There we are. But Canada, you're welcome to him. At least it's not our problem anymore.
And what do you say about the people you don't like?
No, I'm just saying. No, but I've got very, very good friends that I love and adore, but I can still think their politics are wrong about everything, and I can say that to their face. I think honesty in friendship is an important thing. Is it not? Well, look, I mean, Trump's influence on that election.
I think Mark Carney might say that with the Americans. That might be his point.
When we had a chat in Fresh Produce in Waitrose about the Brexit vote, there we are. He insisted he'd been independent. I went, I won. But anyway, Donald, I'm very mature about these things, as you know. Donald Trump's 100th day today in office. Of course, you could argue that it's his election that actually decided that the Canadian election. He has influence everywhere. Day before that, for some reason, Britain decides it's a good idea, along with the EU, to sign a political declaration, which is, kind of fairly anti-Trump. It's basically it's calling for support for the Paris Climate Agreement, the usual net zero nonsense. We'll talk about that in a moment. Free trade, in favour of that. It's guaranteeing Ukraine's territorial integrity. Again, that only counts if you're actually going to be, putting up the troops and the military aid to deliver that. But question we'll ask our audience: what are Donald Trump's biggest achievements? What are his biggest mistakes so far? 100 days. He's certainly got straight to work. He's had a massive influence. No one could pretend we haven't noticed Donald Trump being back in office. What do you think his biggest achievements are? His biggest mistakes are?
I mean, the number of people coming in from the southern border is down about 80%, which is quite incredible. It didn't happen in his first term, and clearly the message he sent to people trying to illegally enter the US...
No, he did cut immigration in his first term.
But not by anything like those numbers.
That's because it wasn't as sky high, yeah.
And also the deportation numbers were lower than they had been in Obama and went on to be under a Biden. So it wasn't a resounding success.
And you, as a bleeding art liberal, you still think that's a good thing?
No, no, of course you should have illegal immigrants. Barack Obama deported 3 million in one term.
But that was okay because it was Barack Obama.
But I mean, the difference is, look, there are some people that are US citizens that are being deported, and so that's not okay. That's not how the rule of law works.
Yeah, due process.
But aside from that, clearly it's a success to stop people illegally coming into your country, and so that's a credit to him. And other countries should look at that. Does the message have more effect than the law? Just simply taking people out. However, on the other hand, the growth projections for the US are down about 70%. Now, if you were CEO of a private company and you'd made a decision that did that to the company, you wouldn't be in a job. So I think he's facing serious consequences probably in the second 100 days as a result of his economic moves that have happened. And I think that's what you see the ramifications all over the world. Mark Carney is a prime example of people changing the way the world works because of Trump's decisions. Yeah,
indeed. I mean, I would say a big success has been how he's been dealing with things in the Middle East. I know we've got IDF troops back in Gaza, but he's giving Israel full backing. But a magnificent failure, I would say, Ukraine. We talked about that many times on the show. We're going to be talking about all of this, by the way, with Seb Gorka, a security advisor to Donald Trump in the White House while he is in the White House this morning.
I would
say Donald Trump. I'm really happy with him on the trans stuff, on protecting women and girls' rights and single-sex spaces and sport and the like. Really happy with the Doge stuff, cutting government spending. I mean, America simply cannot continue to be goodness knows how many trillions of dollars in debt. It's just not going to fly anymore.
I think Donald Trump measures his own success in terms of how many people are talking about him and how much control he seems to have. And by that measure, I suspect he thinks he's had a very good first 100 days. But I do think a lot of the decisions he's made, the way he's behaved on Ukraine, the way he's put tariffs on and taken them off, and it's been completely unpredictable. I think the consequences of these 100 days will be felt for quite a long time to come.
Let's also talk about, as we touched at the beginning, these huge blackouts across Spain and Portugal. I mean, absolutely massive blackouts. Pretty much all the major cities, Madrid, Lisbon, Seville, elsewhere, actually just basically pretty much all electricity out. Now, that means, planes can't fly, trains can't run, cash points don't work, people's mobile phones stop working, can't watch TV. People couldn't get me. People were queuing up to buy, wind-up radios and the things like that. But basically, I mean, massive issue for everybody. Traffic lights down. I mean, you can have. There've been all these TV shows where you have this sudden power outage and people die and planes fall out of the sky and the like. These can be very, very, very dangerous moments. Power is now returning in Spain and Portugal, but huge number, millions and millions of people are hit by the blackout. First of all, we were told it might have been some unusual weather event. Well, there wasn't any unusual weather.
It was quite hot weather. It's been quite hot weather.
No, not for Spain. It's about 22 degrees in Madrid. Madrid's usually one of the hottest.
I think they said it's unusually hot for the year, and that might have affected it.
That's so why would that? Oh, so the electricity system can't cope in April, but it can in August when it's twice the temperature. Don't be a silly person. Let's not be silly. A lot of energy experts are saying actually what this does come down to most realistically, and there's lots of talk, was it a cyber attack? That was my first thought, that no, actually it's more likely down to net zero policies. Spain and Portugal particularly, but Spain massively relied for its electricity on solar power, wind power. 53% at the time they went down, 53% of their electricity was solar, and another 10% or so was wind. And there is some, we'll get an energy expert to explain this. There appears, according to energy experts, to be sort of a surge, something which basically means that everything just stops. It can't cope with a big change in the supply of electricity, and it just conks out in a way that it doesn't when the fossil fuel producers produce it. Again, I don't pretend to be an expert on this. However, it does seem to me to be one of those things where if this, you think about California wildfires or anything else, oh my God, it's non-stop. BBC, Sky ITV, it's hours and hours of this stuff. And, climate change. No one, because it's not climate change, and because it looks like, I don't know for sure, it looks like it may well be net zero policies and reliance on unreliable renewable energy is the reason why this has happened. Well, anyway, move along, nothing to see here, let's carry on. What a surprise.
I mean, I think one of the suggestions is that because of the amount of renewables, the central grid isn't of the quality it needs to be able to bring together a more disparate system.
Very well explained.
I read it. I'm not going to claim I'm first-hand expert. But
you know more than Ed Miliband, don't worry.
It sounds like it's not quite up to standard, and that's how this has happened, which wouldn't happen if you had sort of more centralised system. But I mean, I have to say, just to note, one thing that I really did laugh at that I think a Brit would relate to is that you couldn't buy a pint because the
front
system
page of the Sun. I mean, come on.
And so people were going out with their cash to all the street vendors desperately to get their beer and whatnot. So I think that's a kind of priority that but no wonder Portugal is our oldest ally with behaviour like that.
We love the Portuguese. They love us. They're very, very good to us. No, but this is the thing, though, that most experts in the field of security and say we are something like 3 meals, max 5 meals away from civil insurrection. The point at which people go, hold on a minute, I don't know when I'm going to get food again. I haven't got power. I can't protect anything. I've got no access to my money. Bearing a lot of people, might just get 10 or 20 quid out of the cash point at a time, or they paying contactless. Well, your electricity doesn't work, so you can't pay for anything. You've got no money. You haven't got food stocked up. You can't heat any of the food you've got. You're leaving the freezer closed because you don't know when the electricity is going back on again. At that point, civil order breaks down. We are only a few meals away from civil disorder. This is something people need to worry about. This is certainly something the authorities worry about. And again, I want to know from our authorities, how secure are we that this wouldn't happen here? And given that, by the way, Ed Miliband's policy is for us to be 95% dependent on renewables by 2030. I mean, it's not going to happen, but he wants to be 95% dependent for renewables for all our electricity needs.
I mean, it does make you realise the fragility of the system we rely on. I mean, this studio, you wouldn't be on air, nothing would happen.
I mean, there are upsides, people. Yeah. There are upsides.
But I mean, I for one, I don't even use cash. I often don't leave the house.
You're a young person.
I don't leave the house with a wallet usually.
I thought when we first got together, my husband, this is long before everyone did the contactless thing, before lockdowns and things, he would never have cash on him. I'm like, you're not the Queen. For the love of God, have cash on you. If you're a woman, you always have ladies, back me up. You always have some spare cash on you, because just in case of an emergency, you need to know you've got some cash.
My grandmother never left the house without a purse of coins, just in case.
Coins, that'll help.
Yeah,
to annoy people at the cashier, paying for everything in 2p pieces.
It was mainly for parking the car, I think, but even those days are gone. But you know, I mean, it is horrifying, and I think, you know, the way that all the systems would go down, and that they would go down so quickly, you have to be glad this wasn't a cyber attack, because if it were, it could last a lot longer.
Could have been. Here's the thing: if it was, I don't think they'd tell us. Huge. I mean, look, we've got the cyber attack on M&S. We've had cyber attacks on big banks. Cyber attacks on the NHS. We've had. This is absolutely the stuff that the likes of, you know, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran are doing, and other cyber criminals as well. If it were a cyber attack, we'll never be told. That's the thing. Just finally, before we go to a break, I want to talk about small boat crossings. It emerged yesterday, the latest figures, that small boat crossings of Channel migrants are now topped 10,000 in 2025. This is the earliest point in the year since records began. Last year, I think it took until June to reach 10,000 people crossing, largely young, undocumented men, largely turned out to be coming from the Middle East or from North Africa. Smashing those gangs definitely worked. I mean, all Keir Starmer had to do was get in a room with Macron, have a chat, be on good terms, not be all, you know, Boris Johnson or Liz Truss-like, and he would sort this out. How's that working for you, Benjamin?
Well, it's not going very well, is it? I mean, for context, at this point last year it was 7,000 crossings. At this point 2 years ago it was 5,500, so it's almost doubled.
I mean, a lot of it's down to weather.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, the government won't be happy about the sunny day we're having today, because that inevitably means people feel mildly safer to cross the channel, so that's a part of it. I mean, surely, smashing the gangs obviously makes sense, and maybe part of the acceleration is that the system they've got in place in order to get people across and get the money out of these people is much more well-oiled now than it was 3 years ago, and so that's why they're doing it. But clearly the gangs aren't smashed, and you know, any reasonable government, and I don't doubt the government wants to stop it. It's a nightmare and it costs a fortune.
I think they want to stop it because they know it's unpopular. I don't think they sort of morally and personally feel strongly about it. I don't think Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary, other than wanting to keep her job, is that bothered about it.
I think that's unfair. I don't think anybody...
They fought every single effort by the Tories in the last government to try and do anything about it. They fought every single measure. I mean, we've got this ridiculous announcement today that sex offenders, foreign sex offenders, will be barred from gaining asylum. Oh, I mean, wow, that they weren't anyway. But there are plenty of people, we've seen case after case, in the last few months of foreign offenders, sex offenders, drug dealers, violent offenders, you name it, who've not had asylum but have been entitled to stay here by some idiot activist judge in the higher tribunals. But equally, why only sex offenders? You commit any crime other than speeding or a parking ticket. I mean, even if you're shoplifting, bye-bye. I don't see why you should be in this country. Bye-bye.
I agree with you. And actually, it's shocking that...
I'm gradually bringing it around. I know a lot of you get cross that I have Benjamin in the studio, but we're just trying to... We're going to take these liberal souls one day at a time. We're going to take one at a time, and we're going to bring them over from the dark side.
I'm like Mark Carney in Waitrose. I'm just scared to disagree at this point. I mean, you know, it was the case that if you did a sex offence that got a prison sentence of a year or more, then you wouldn't get refugee status, you wouldn't be allowed to stay here. And now it's any sentence that puts you on the sex offenders register.
Hugh Edwards
blows my mind that you could be on the sex offenders register and allowed to be given citizenship, allowed to stay in this country after that happened.
I guarantee you, even if they change this, it won't make any difference. These people will still be in the country. We've got. I'm sorry, it's the judges who are the problem now. It's not even the law. Their interpretation of the law is so mad and insane. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Love to hear your thoughts on the blackouts in Spain and Portugal. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the small boat crossings. Just invite this. Why don't we just invite the world's criminals in and just have done with it and just save the middleman? You know, why don't we instead don't pay the people smugglers? We'll just bring you in. Mark Carney winning the Canadian election, but particularly I want to hear from you about Donald Trump's 100 days. I want to know what are his biggest achievements so far in the first 100 days. What are his biggest mistakes? Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
I mean, what that is downright cowardly on the part of the organisation. They seem unable to face up to the truth, and so they're shooting the messenger. And this is such an ugly part of our institutions now, you know, that I get so many emails from people, including from inside the police, by the way, they're so desperate to reveal things, and yet they're terrified.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:27 is the time. Benjamin Butterworth is still with me. We've gone through an awful lot of the big stories today. We haven't even got to, you know, the Irish rap group Kneecap apologising to the families of two MPs who were actually murdered after calling on their audience to kill your local MP a couple of years ago. I guess that's normal behaviour. Police never got involved. They wouldn't have got involved because, of course, you know, if you're on the left and it's okay, you could do that. You can pretty much it doesn't matter what the cause is. If you're on the left, you can pretty much get away with doing anything, can't you? Because, you know, in no way do we have two-tier justice in this country. Don't be silly. We'll talk about that later in the show. Plenty more coming up. I must go to actually the call I want to get to just a couple of moments is about those blackouts in Spain. But let's go to some of your messages coming in about Donald Trump's 100th day in office today. What are his biggest achievements? His biggest mistakes so far? Edmund says he promised to sort the border and he got it done, as you pointed out, Benjamin. Glenn says he's managed to unite the world against the USA, but not sure if that's the achievement. Paul says achievements: reducing the immigration flow to a trickle. Mistakes: thinking that just precision bombing the Houthis will resolve the threat in the Red Sea. It hasn't. Polly says 100 days is just beginning. Grab your popcorn, hang on and enjoy the show. I think things are about to get even wilder. I think you may be right, Polly. Timothy says girls are girls and boys are boys. At least he didn't need the highest court in the land to explain the difference in sexes. Indeed. Penny says he managed to get the Canadians to vote unwisely. And Michael says Trump not ending the war in Ukraine within 24 hours and then by Easter is probably his biggest failure. Right, well, let's go to the phone line. Sandra is on the line in Andalusia in Spain. Sandra, have you been affected by those blackouts then?
Yes, it was very, very scary because it's gone on for so long.
So presumably have you got power back now completely?
It came back this morning about 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
But it started about midday yesterday.
So almost 24 hours without electricity. That's quite
24
something.
24 hours it took. Exactly. We've used the little blackouts here. They last for an hour maybe. And you normally get some sort of warning coming through, but never that everything has gone.
Well, hold on a minute. You're used to blackouts. So last time I looked, Spain's a first world country. Why do they have blackouts regularly?
But we do. We've lived in Spain for 15 years, and we do get blackouts. It does happen. We are used to it, but not for that length of time.
Yeah.
Not for that.
So people didn't panic at first, because what we've heard here is that an awful lot of people in Spain and Portugal, it happened to Portugal as well, that they didn't know it was this big nationwide blackout until they got power back.
Because there was no word of mouth, but our Spanish neighbours were the ones who told us.
Yeah.
Also, he said that Spain and France had got France and Portugal had gone down because we didn't know.
Yeah.
And we sort of expected, by tea time we'll be okay. Tea time came and it didn't. So we're boiling a can of water on a gas stove to try and have a wash.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had plenty of water in, which is okay. But like you said earlier, if it went on for any more than 24 hours, 2 days, 3 days, we'd be stuck because, again, we had 20 euros in cash in the house. That was it.
Yeah.
What's that going to buy us? It's really given us a wake-up call to realise that you can't rely on net zero. Because
and this is the thing, and again, it's fascinating. Everyone's kind of skirting over it. I mean, the Telegraph has been a big campaigner on this issue, pointing out, this is what the experts are saying. They were saying there was talk, or was it a cyber attack? Again, I don't think they tell us if it was because it's so huge, and the implications are so huge. But they say, it was an unusual weather event or something. But it wasn't unusual weather.
No, the weather yesterday wasn't unusually hot for Spain. It was nice. The sun was out, but it wasn't unusually any different to any other this time of year. But to go on for as long as it did, it was very, very scary, and I should imagine it scared a lot of people.
And do you think it's going to change anything in Spain in terms of the policies they've got? Because I think they were on 53% electricity for their 50% solar for their electricity, and another 10% on wind. Much, much higher than we ever achieve here, but not as high as Ed Miliband wants to achieve here. He wants 95% renewable energy for our electricity.
It's just unbelievable, isn't it? I just can't get your head around it. I just cannot get my head around where this ideology is coming from, because we're all going to suffer big time if this happened in England. It just brings everything to a standstill.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like traffic lights not working, trains, planes. Exactly. It's amazing just how much, as you say, cash points, paying for stuff in a shop. Unless who's keeping a wind-up radio and a gas stove and a wad of cash under their bed,
Well, we're going backwards, aren't we? That's what we need to be doing.
It's almost like there was a reason why we used fossil fuels all those years, eh? Sandra, thank you so much for calling. I'm so glad you got the power back. So glad you could call us, and we'll ask the team if you've got a spare room, we'll all pop over and chip in.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
She got off the phone quickly then, didn't she? Anyway, thank you very much indeed for that, Sandra. Thank you. 10:32 is the time. Going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be talking to Steve Gill. He's a former advisor in the White House about, Trump's 100 days, that Carney win, and where are we with Ukraine and Putin. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to Steve Gill now. He's a former advisor to both the Clinton and Bush Jr. administrations in the White House, and joins us to talk about, all things American, and indeed Canadian. Very good morning to you, Steve.
Hey, Julia, good morning.
Thanks for joining us. First of all, I must ask you about that Canadian election. Shock victory for Mark Carney's Liberals. There's no doubt at all that in terms of simpatico, Donald Trump would have a lot more in common with Pierre Poilievre of the Conservative Party, who was absolutely, 20 points ahead when Donald Trump came into the office. Donald Trump then started talking about, taking Canada as the 51st state, impose these massive tariffs, basically gave the Liberals that narrow victory in the elections. That was a big mistake on his part, wasn't it?
Well, we'll see. First of all, the narrow victory is turning out to be, it looks like as the final numbers come in, a very narrow minority lead for the Liberals, which means they'll probably have to face an election in about a year. And we'll see how the tariffs and how the economy in Canada fares in another year. Keep in mind that the Conservatives spent their last few months attacking Donald Trump rather than embracing the fact that Canada was imposing very high tariffs, hurting their own consumers in order to keep U.S. goods and products and services out of Canada. So again, we've got about 90 to 100 countries that are in the process of negotiating these tariff deals. You're going to see the tariffs start coming down with reciprocity and fairness. And we'll see what that does not only to the U.S. economy, the Canadian economy, and to the world economy in the next 90 days, not this first 100 days.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've got that pause, so I think we're still on the 10% as the basic anyway, still in play. But I have to say, again, I've come back to it a million times on the tariff issue. When Donald Trump said he had 3 separate aims, he was going to basically onshore all this manufacturing back again because it was going to be too expensive to import stuff, so people would onshore. He was going to make loads of billions and billions in dollars raked in from all these tariffs, and he was going to have free trade deals with all these countries. All 3 of these things are mutually exclusive. So but we're going to claim that any one of them is the success, even though he says he wants all 3.
Well, the tariffs coming down is going to get U.S. products, particularly agricultural products, into other countries that have been keeping us out. And you are seeing, billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of manufacturing being announced, expanded manufacturing in the U.S., companies coming back to the U.S. And we just saw that Apple is going to move their manufacturing from China to India to avoid the tariffs.
Yeah.
So,
how's that working out for American workers? So they're going to get they're not going to get a job whether it's in India or China, are they?
Well, the cell phones are going to be a lot cheaper, and more importantly, when you've got Ford, when you've got major manufacturing companies, auto manufacturing companies expanding here in the U.S., Hyundai and others, that's going to create jobs. And again, for our farmers, those who've been cut out of these foreign markets, whether it's ranchers, whether it's dairy, again, Canada was imposing about 250% tariffs on American dairy. They had a 25% tariff on American oranges and orange juice. Who are they trying to protect? Those Vancouver and Edmonton orange groves?
Yeah.
I mean, so some of their tariffs are ridiculous. They're going to come down. And again, we're going to see the response. Keep in mind that when these tariffs went into effect, the stock market dropped about 1,000 points. The media went into hysterics. The next day, it went up 1,200 points, and they didn't even mention it. The stock market in the U.S. is about 10% higher than it was a year ago. So again, the hysterics of the media need to take a pause and deal with reality.
Well, again, but not as high as it was when Trump came into office. I mean, let's talk about Donald Trump then, because it's his 100th day in office, and my God, he got to work within, minutes of declaring the oath of office. Certainly his first day was not just a party day; it was just signing those executive orders. What do you think his biggest achievements have been in the first 100 days, but what do you think also his biggest failures have been?
Well, first of all, he's the first president in history to probably develop writer's cramp from all of those executive orders from day one. I worked through a transition between Herbert Walker Bush and Bill Clinton. And the first 100 days is a ridiculous time to make an assessment. You have most of his cabinet officials just went into business, the last 30 days. Most of the sub-cabinet top officials are still not being moved through the process because the Senate and the House in the U.S. keep taking time off rather than doing their job. So there's been a delay, as there always is, with getting people in. And yet Donald Trump definitely hit the ground running. And I think the biggest wins at this point, I would say, would be to secure the border. We had millions of illegals coming across the border. Now we have the border agents who are bored because there's nobody coming across. We're seeing the most violent criminals deported, despite the efforts of some who are harboring them in our courtrooms, trying to block it. So I think the illegal immigration is also carrying people who are being cut off of welfare and food stamps and health care. They're self-deporting as well as those that are being deported. So I think that's the top win. Second, you're seeing American energy independence restored. We've seen gas prices drop from the high. We're seeing oil prices at about $62 a barrel, a dramatic change, and that's going to impact manufacturing costs. It's going to impact the global economy in a positive way. I'd put those two at the top. And then the third most important thing, he's living in the heads of the left-wing media and the Democrats. They're in complete flummox.
That's not an achievement.
They don't know what to do. I count that as an achievement.
I mean, look, I love what he's done on the border, and I wish our country would get to grips. We've just had just 10,000, I mean, nothing compared to what you've had, millions every year, but 10,000 legal migrants arriving on Channel boats in the first few months of this year. It's the highest it's been ever. I mean, and our country just goes, oh, have a free hotel. Let's just put you into the system, and we've got no chance of deporting most of these people. So I'd love it if we learnt some lessons there. But still very concerned about where he is on Ukraine. That is my single biggest issue with what he's done so far. Vladimir Putin announced a 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine coming up for this weekend. They've rejected the proposed peace plan, as have Ukraine, effectively. Do you think that meeting, that one-on-one meeting with Zelensky at the Vatican ahead of the Pope's funeral, I mean, it's very staged, the two men in the chairs next to each other, you know, on camera. But do you think that might have changed anything at all in terms of Donald Trump's approach to Ukraine?
I don't think so. And I think two things are the barrier to that. First, we're getting solid reports that there are those within Ukraine who are threatening Zelensky that if he cuts a deal, they will kill him. So I think for his own livelihood, he's blocked from being able to do any kind of negotiated result. And then one of my law partners and I just did a paper a few weeks ago detailing that under Ukrainian law, their constitution and their law, they have to have a referendum, a national referendum, before they could agree to transferring territory. And under martial law, which has just been extended, they can't have a presidential election. He's barred from negotiating with Russia, and they can't transfer property without a referendum. And those territories, including Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, and others, would get to vote. So that's another barrier. They can't even transfer the territory. And I don't think that the Brits or that the U.S. negotiators are really aware of what Ukrainian law does that blocks him from really negotiating.
Well, I mean, he can, of course, there's no question at all. There would have to be a referendum. You can't just give away part of your territory. I don't think there's any question in which Ukraine would say, yeah, well, we will recognise, you know, not just de facto, but de jure, that Russia owns Ukraine. That would be absurd. I don't think anyone sane, Donald Trump apparently, thinks that is going to happen. But in terms of, you know, Donald Trump said he was going to bring peace on day one, full stop, end of. He hasn't. He's still trying to get it. He said he might walk away if he doesn't think that either side is serious about peace. Would that be a failure or a success for him then?
I think it would be an understanding that it wasn't our war to begin with. It was Joe Biden's war to begin this. It was NATO's war, proxy war to begin with, and that it wasn't really Donald Trump's. No, it was NATO that pushed it at a time when Zelensky had signed a deal to end it. He was forced to continue it as he is now.
That's not what happened. That's been completely and utterly debunked. It's genuinely been so completely debunked. It's just nonsense.
You're
far too clever and knowledgeable a man to claim that. You are, honestly.
By the way, Zelensky 6 times has agreed to sign a minerals deal and now saying he never intended to and never will. You can't trust a guy who lies 6 straight times, showed up at the White House.
He said he will sign a mineral deal in return for security guarantees, which are not forthcoming. Otherwise, there's no point signing a mineral deal.
They had the written deal that he had agreed to, and they signed a letter of intent a week ago with the Treasury Secretary.
Well, I mean, God forbid you'd have a leader who'd do something or not do something that he said he would do. I mean, goodness knows, America would never have that, would they? Come on.
Well, don't do a deal with somebody you can't trust, and Zelensky can't be trusted.
But Donald Trump thinks he can trust Putin. That's my worry.
Well, I think he's looking at Putin's interest. You have to align with what are Putin's interests, and are his interests aligned with getting to peace? And I think his interests are aligned with getting peace. And Zelensky's are not.
His interests are aligned with Ukraine surrendering. That's different.
Just the territories that are Russian-speaking and have been historically Russian, including Crimea.
I'm sorry, the Donbass was not historically Russian, and the Crimea, for most of recorded history, has not been Russian. These are simply untrue statements. These are Kremlin talking points. These are internet Kremlin talking points. These are not actual facts.
I'll tell you what, Julia, I have been to Donetsk and Mariupol. Get your editors, give us a camera crew. Why don't you and I go there? Show the pictures of where Mariupol is today versus where it was under Ukrainian control. We will show people what it looks like. Tell your bosses.
It's utterly irrelevant to the conversation. Steve Gill.
I'll meet you there. Show them
disappoint me sometimes. Steve Gill, former advisor to both Clinton and the Bush senior administrations. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you joining us. 10:45 is the time. Benjamin Butterworth listening to all of that. Come back in on, I'm guessing, Ukraine, one topic of most interest there.
Of course, but what I alarms me is that these Trump advocates, these people in that Make America Great Again world, think the way that Steve did just then. It scares me because it's not bounded in fact, and the fact
it's really not. And he's a highly intelligent, knowledgeable man.
Precisely. That's why it's alarming. And are these the people that have the ear of Trump? Are these the people that are giving him advice? Because up until the last week or so, it looks like he was thinking along those lines. The way he talks about Crimea. I remember I interviewed the winner of Eurovision, who was from Ukraine, who had grown up in Crimea. She told me that her daughter is the 4th generation of their family to have to leave Crimea because of a war by Russia.
Yeah.
It's not Russian.
But also, Russian
want
speakers. Zelensky is a Russian-speaking Ukrainian. It's just mad to make this claim.
Look, by that logic, America must be British because they speak English.
Well, yes. Well, they'd be better off, wouldn't they? Make America Britain again. There we are. 10:46. There you are, Steve. I hope you're still listening. 10:46 is the time. Up next, going to talk about why so much the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about what the real reasons for those extraordinary mass blackouts affecting millions of people across Spain and Portugal might actually be. Is it uncomfortable that it's down to your climate change policies and net zero? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Well, we are allowing it to happen, and it's not just Datchet. There are so many towns up and down the country that I'm afraid have been at least temporarily ruined by illegal immigration and indeed sort of semi-legal migration, by which I mean people coming over on false pretenses. They do manage to rustle up the paperwork, but they're just flooding areas and performing only cash in hand jobs, bringing over relatives.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Benjamin Butterworth with us as well. Right now, let's talk about what happened in Spain and Portugal. Well, it's happening still in large parts of the country. Most, though, have now seen their electricity restored after an extraordinary blackout that affected millions of people across most of the country, certainly in all the major towns and cities of Spain and Portugal, including their capitals. Meant that basically, you didn't have any electricity, you didn't have any aircon on a warm day. Phones didn't work, cash points didn't work, you couldn't pay for anything, trains didn't work, traffic lights didn't work, planes were grounded. Absolute chaos. First talk was it a cyber attack? Then we were told it was some unusual weather event. Or was it? Well, let's talk to Andy Mayer. He's an energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the free market think tank. Very good morning to you, Andy.
Morning, Julia.
Well, it seems to have emerged now, and again, not that the usual suspects want to talk about it, that one of the most likely causes for this energy blackout was actually net zero policies.
So with the health warning that the inquiry is not yet concluded,
Exactly, yeah.
It would be an almighty coincidence if the very thing that most of us who are sceptical of some of these policies have been talking about for years coming true has now happened. And if that's not the original cause, which might be anything from a weather event to something else, like those things you mentioned, then the thing to focus on with net zero is the increased risk to the system.
Yeah.
So if I can draw you a picture. So imagine the electricity grid is rather like a hamster running on a wheel. And it's a Spanish hamster, so let's call it Juan. So Juan's running away there. It's 50 times a second he's got to run in order to keep the system from failing. So when you put solar power on that grid, what you're doing is you're feeding Juan more sunflower seeds. And if you feed him too many, there's too much sun, then he flies off the wheel and the system fails. If, on the other hand, it's dark and no seeds can be produced, then he slows down and he comes off the wheel himself. In both cases, the grid is at risk of failing.
Right.
And it's not just one hamster. It's actually Juan and his 10,000 mates running on their own wheels that have all got to be kept in sync together in order for that event to not happen. And that's the risk of net zero, that you have a lot of very complicated forms of energy being produced that are not working in the same way that they used to work with gas power and coal fire and even nuclear power, which use turbines, which create their own inertia. They turn their own wheels.
I keep reading this term inertia in it. That's not kind of how we all understand the word inertia. Like, oh, I've got no inertia, I'm just going to lie on the sofa all day and watch telly. In terms of the electricity supply, what does that mean?
So what it means is when you have a traditional gas-fired power station, which has a turbine, it turns round and it creates its own frequency. So it's creating alternating current 50 times a second for the UK grid or the European grids like Spain. And in order for things to work and not fail, that frequency has to be maintained within very narrow tolerances. Right. So about 0.5% in the case of the UK. Now, when that doesn't happen, various things kick into motion to protect equipment. So if the frequency is wrong, you can damage equipment. And if you damage equipment, you then get a cascading event where equipment further down the line gets damaged. So those relays kick off, and that's what shuts the grid down, which is what's happened in Spain.
Yeah, is it sort of like, you know, if something goes wrong electricity, you get a surge and everything fuses. And it just turns off just to protect everything. So everything fuses in your home, but you just flick a switch and it's fine. But you can't just flick a switch for the whole of Spain and Portugal.
Yeah, so, well, effectively that's what they did. They flicked the switch to stop things happening. Because if they have an oscillation event, which is what the frequency failure can be called, it means that something will start in one place and then move to other places, regardless of the cause.
And then it gets worse. Okay, so first of all, we were told it may well be some sort of freak weather event, but it turns out there wasn't a freak weather event. And people think, oh, well, it was very warm. It wasn't. It was 22 degrees, which ain't very warm by Spanish standards. And then, of course, speculation there might have been a cyber attack. Now, kind of, you know, we've seen some massive cyber attacks on, banks, on the NHS, Waitrose, not Waitrose, M&S are still dealing with a cyber attack problem that they've had. But two countries being impacted, I would not put that past Russia or China or anyone. Would we even be told if it had been a cyber attack? But is my question. But now the most likely explanation does appear that actually it was net zero policies. There's over-reliance on solar power and wind power, producing more than 60% of Spain's electricity yesterday when this hit. I mean, way more than we would ever do. I mean, although way below when Ed Miliband wants to get us to at 95% of electricity from solar and from wind. But why are authorities so wary of telling us what's going on? Because it seems to me both, the mainstream media and the authorities seem to kind of want to brush over the causes, whereas, of course, if it was climate change that was responsible, it'd be all over the news. It wouldn't just be an item on the BBC website, it would be 10 items on the BBC website.
So it's two different things. The cybersecurity and weather event theories are trigger events, so what might cause an oscillation event. The net zero thing is a system event. So it's the level of risk you increase on the system when another event, a trigger event happens, which then causes the system to fall over. So because there is no inertia in a solar farm's output or a wind farm's output. In order to create that inertia service, you have to put other things into a net zero system. And the argument is that the Spanish have not been very thorough about doing that.
Right.
So they have giant flywheels turning uselessly in sheds somewhere in order to create the inertia that a solar farm doesn't provide. So one of the, I mean, if we go more into the net zero argument, one of the things most critics of net zero who still think that something should be done about carbon emissions think is that you need to make renewable power account for the cost of all its unintended consequences. And the non-provision of inertia services is one of those unintended consequences. Yeah. So intermittency is a problem, connection to the grid is a problem, turning at the right speed is a problem. Now, if you can make renewables account for all of that and pay for it, then you can fairly compete renewables with nuclear and gas and other things.
But we don't. And even just having the backup of the fossil fuels for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, as is often the case in this country, though not this week, thankfully, then the costs are sky high. But, of course, you don't need a backup for fossil fuels because they're reliable. Almost like, Andy, there was a reason why we started using fossil fuels, isn't there, in the first place? Could this happen here? Because we spoke to Sandra, who's a caller, who's in Ideological. She's lived there 15 years, and she said, they basically went pretty much 24 hours without any electricity. They had 20 euros. They were really getting very, very worried. Can't access cash, got no electricity, trying to heat some water on a gas stove to wash. It was a real worry for them. But could that happen here? And especially if it happened here, in the dead of winter, what would we do?
So, short answer, yes, it could happen. And the NESO, who look after security on the grid, was sufficiently worried about this. They produced a report about it in May 2024 and talked about the ways that they currently act to tackle oscillation events. Well worth a read. One of the things that will make this risk much higher is if we push towards the 2030 zero carbon grid plan that the government is currently
didn't they take
on.
It down to 95%, just quietly? Manifesto said 100%, but took it down.
It's an irrelevant difference.
Yeah.
The simple problem is this: unless they have built into those plans to accelerate net zero proper security measures to account for a similar event happening here, the risk of that event happening is going up and up and up with every new addition to the grid.
I don't want it to happen, but I'm kind of the view that we're going to have to go to the blackout situation at some point for people to get sort of real and understand. And the media, I think the media class in this country is just, they were appalling on things like lockdown as well. They've been appalling on the trans issue, and they're appalling on the net zero issue, and actually not asking the right questions. So just, I don't mean to share my opinions, but just try some facts at some point. But for people to actually ask some of the right questions and say, look, is this actually a good idea? And I think once we have blackouts, and I think it's a matter of when, not if, they might actually start doing that. But is it just only a matter of time?
Well, I guess the analogy to use is the one that the climate doomsters use, which is that of the boiled frog. Each additional solar farm on the grid isn't necessarily going to cause the problem, but the aggregation of all of them together puts us in a very dangerous situation.
Right. Okay.
That's what we need to think about.
We've had more talk of hamsters and frogs than I expected for this conversation. Very much appreciate Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. We'll come back to this topic with Benjamin Butterworth and other guests throughout the show. Lots more to talk about. Don't forget, later in the show, we're going to be talking to Seb Gorka, senior advisor to Donald Trump in the White House, about Trump's 100 days and that Canadian election. Is it all Donald Trump's fault? We're also going to be talking about sex offenders who are from abroad getting asylum here or not, as the case may be, and plenty more. This is Talk.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Lots more to talk about on a very busy news day. I know you're probably lounging in the garden, not you? Sorry, working from home. I must use the correct terminology. Or, as we discovered yesterday, doing one of your 3 jobs from home, apparently. But whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, or indeed listening in Andalusia in Spain. Now, the Blackout's over, as Sandra is doing. You gave us a call a bit earlier. It is fantastic to have your company. Coming up in this hour, we're going to talk a bit more about Mark Carney's Liberal Party winning the election in Canada. A major political comeback, one of the biggest political comebacks ever for a party far behind in the polls, 20 points behind in the polls when Justin Trudeau, boo hiss, was in power. But the campaign was fuelled by Donald Trump's annexation threats, becoming the 51st states of the United States, and, of course, that trade tariff war as well. Speaking after the result, although we're talking about a very narrow victory for Carney's Liberals, as indeed Trudeau got last time round, he warned that Trump was trying to break Canada and that he would fight back. Also today is the 100th day of Donald Trump's second presidency. Downing Street has drafted a proposed joint statement with the EU rejecting some of the US president's key policies, including backing for Ukraine's territorial integrity, the Paris Climate Agreement, and also free trade. But we're asking you today to get in touch about what are Donald Trump's biggest achievements and his biggest mistakes so far. Love to hear from you on that. Do get in touch at 0344 499 1000. Text the word Talk to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV to have your say as well. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. I'd also love to hear from you about the plan by the government to have a new law announced by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, today, which will mean that foreign sex offenders are set to be barred from gaining asylum in the UK. I find it extraordinary they were allowed to gain asylum, but apparently they're now going to be barred. Meanwhile, under the latest figures from the Home Office, small boat crossings across the Channel have now passed a record 10,000 so far this year. That is a huge increase on where they were at this time last year. Yeah, some of it's down to the weather, but I'm pretty sure an awful lot of it is down to, smashing the gangs, which Keir Starmer announced he would do last July and has gone so very well so far. Plus, that Supreme Court ruling still has its ripples across the political firmament. 4 Labour MPs, the usual suspects, have signed a trans rights pledge that criticises what they called the divisive Supreme Court ruling on women's rights. Oh, by the way, and a bunch of junior doctors have claimed that it's scientifically illiterate to say that there is a biological difference between men and women. Do not let these doctors ever treat you or your child. That's all I would say to you. Anyway, lots more to talk about, and joining me for a lot of the chat is Benjamin Butterworth, journalist and broadcaster once again. Good morning once again to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Lots to talk about. Let's go to the Mark Carney victory in Canada. Justin Trudeau's Liberals were way back in the polls, 20 points behind. No question at all. It was a done deal, wasn't it, that Pierre Poilievre's Conservative Party was going to win a couple of months ago. And then Justin Trudeau goes, Mark Carney gets elected, even though not even a sitting MP, our former Bank of England governor, a man who spent very few of his years of his life on this planet actually in Canada. He becomes the acting the Prime Minister, even though not elected to the... I find this very difficult. Not legal, fine under their constitution, but nevertheless in the Canadian Parliament. And Donald Trump basically threatens to make Canada the 51st state. Trade war. What a surprise. Donald Trump basically wins the election for the Liberal Mark Carney. Big mistake by Donald Trump, or do you think he secretly wanted him to win?
Well, he put out a statement on polling day yesterday saying we'll make Canada the 51st state and won't it be fantastic? Vote with that in mind. And you wonder whether when he says that he thinks, he wants to have the argument to keep going, which is what he'll get with Mark Carney. But then, it's not...
He has more in common with Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
Although Poilievre is not... People say he's the Trump candidate. He's really not. He's just a very sane, sensible, I would say liberal, actually, in the oldest sense of the word.
Yeah, Canadian Conservative is a long way from Donald Trump and MAGA, like the Conservatives in Britain generally would be. But, it's certainly extraordinary. I have to say, I was utterly puzzled. They've won something like 170 seats almost today, which puts them... So they don't have a majority, it looks like. So actually...
As Trudeau didn't,
so they might be in trouble because apparently the average length of time those governments lasted 2.5 years. So Mark Carney's only just become a Member of Parliament today, which absolutely puzzles me. I don't know what it is in their constitution that allowed it. It wasn't as though he was a member of their House of Lords or something like that. That doesn't exist. He just got elected, but he's been Prime Minister for months.
Yeah.
I find that completely ridiculous.
But I think that's bare minimum. You should be an elected, before you're allowed to be leader of a party and become Prime Minister, you should be an elected Member of Parliament.
It's totally bizarre. That really isn't democratic, is it? But will this last is the real question going forward, because they haven't got the majority they want. That can be quite unstable, and it's going to be hard for Canada if Trump keeps going for
Is it good for Keir Starmer? He's got Emmanuel Macron as his big ally, although, again, not doing much for you on the Channel Migrants, is he, Keir, your big mate, Emmanuel? All chummy and huggy, aren't we? But, not actually doing anything to help you on that big issue. But having Mark Carney there in the Canadian Parliament, does that help him? He's got more and more allies, more people perhaps who, to back his sort of view of the world?
Well,
does that make a difference?
After Mark Carney finished being Governor of the Bank of England, he endorsed Labour at the last general election. He said Rachel Reeves has the right ideas.
Although, of course, he was completely independent as Bank of England governor when he backed the Remain campaign for Brexit.
So they certainly have a close relationship. And look, objectively, if you're going to have people in power, you want them to have positive relationships rather than not. I think it's interesting because... Mark Carney in his acceptance speech of winning the election and becoming an MP today says that the world has fundamentally changed, that the generation of countries working closer together and being integrated and free trade after World War II is over. Now, that is a starkly different line to Keir Starmer and the UK government that is trying to manage the provocations of Donald Trump rather dimly and politely, which I think they've done well. But there's very big differences.
And maybe if you're in Canada and you're being threatened to being annexed, I think maybe it's a kind of a different circumstance. And I'm sure he'll work well with Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, Mark Carney, he's a Goldman Sachs banker, became a Bank of England governor. He's totally on the establishment, pushing these abject lies, proven nonsense about what will happen. Even not Bank of England wasn't even just what would happen after we Brexited, whatever the deal was, but the actual vote for Brexit itself would damage our economy. Absolute rubbish. European economy is in a worse state than ours even after Brexit. So but I don't see how, if Germany and France haven't left the EU, I don't know why Brexit is the cause of that. So why would it be the cause for us? Anyway, we can't really know what was Brexit and what was lockdown and what was the Ukraine war impact as well. But he's Mr. Climate change, net zero policies. He went off to work for some big organisation on that. He's about he's a globalist because he's a very rich, highly educated, highly successful man for whom globalism works brilliantly. Yeah, bring in some more immigrants so I can have someone to walk my dog and someone to be a nanny to my kids and drive my Ubers and bring me my lattes. I mean, that works great if you're rich. It just doesn't work out so well for the people who are losing out to cheap labour coming in, or whose companies, the manufacturing companies or the service companies they work for, they now close down because someone from abroad can do it cheaper. I'm a free trader, but only to the extent where it doesn't actually damage people in my own country.
Well, there's no doubt about that. If you're educated, professional, work in services industry and middle class, then maybe it's opened up opportunities in the last few generations.
That's great. And you want your kids to go on those youth exchange schemes to go and work in Berlin or Turin for a year. Brilliant. That's not how normal people live their lives.
But I mean, yeah, if you have a manufacturing job or working class person, then it's evidently caused problems because your jobs have gone to other countries. But one thing I'd point out, Canada, I think, had the highest growth rate among established economies. It was about 4%, which is quite incredible. So I think most Canadians were doing reasonably well, that would suggest. But they had one central problem, which was their housing market again. It's really hard for people to get on the housing ladder.
Which is weird because they've got so much space.
Exactly. I mean, it shows it's a political decision, really, doesn't it, rather than space. So that was one of the big things that the Conservatives were leading on. Will Mark Carney change that? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's talk about Trump's 100 days, because there's no doubt at all. I mean, I think Keir Starmer has handled, Donald Trump very well. I mean, given that we're stuck, David Lammy, I wouldn't have made David Lammy Foreign Secretary.
Neither would I.
I don't think, for different reasons other than the fact that he's been so abusive about Donald Trump, I think that was just a bad idea. And also, the man's an idiot and wrong about most things, which is a stronger argument for him not to be in the job. But your Foreign Secretary needs to be able to work with the people, and he's just not a serious person. But I think he's handled Donald Trump very well. But there's no doubt at all, Trump's 100 days has been a trial for an awful lot of other political leaders. In lots of ways, it has brought us much closer with other EU leaders, and I'm very happy for us to work. I'm a Brexiteer, but I want us to work closely with European leaders. I never thought of Brexit as two fingers up to Europe. I just don't want to be part of the EU. I don't understand why people think that's complicated. But in terms of his policies on Ukraine, in terms of the tariffs, that's been very difficult for Donald for Keir Starmer. But that said, even I would have thought his policies on things like immigration and on DOGE, and on trans, he is way ahead of European leaders who are fighting back against, they call the far right or the hard right, was actually just, I would say, what would have been considered just simply conservative mainstream parties a few years ago, because the politics in Europe has shifted so far to the left now that it's not wanting illegal migrants in your country is somehow an extreme right-wing position now. But Donald Trump is kind of showing you see, you can close your border. You see, you can deport people. You see, you can stand up for women's rights and girls' rights and sport and things. You see, you can actually cut waste in government. When he does that, that creates difficulties, does it not, for leaders like Keir Starmer, who are failing to do any of those things?
I mean, maybe. I think most of it is the economic and diplomatic difficulties that he's created. I think the one thing that defines the last 100 days is that now anything that happens on the world stage is seen through the prism of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Even the Pope's funeral, what was the defining image of it?
Trump.
It wasn't that beautiful basic coffin he'd chosen to be buried in. It was the two leaders, Zelensky and Trump, on those seats that made the front page. And so Donald Trump dominates everything, and I think that must cause a real headache for a lot of leaders, because he dominates domestic headlines in so many other countries.
And it would appear helps decide domestic elections as well.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, in Canada.
Oh, right. Indeed.
I mean, there's no doubt at all in my mind that Mark Carney would not be the Prime Minister of Canada today if Donald Trump had not been elected.
Yeah, although, I mean, I guess you could say Mark Carney rose to the challenge in a way that other people didn't. There was nothing stopping the Conservative taking that mantle. It was available to be taken.
No, that's true. That is true. Let's talk, again, we spoke just before the top of the hour, if you just tuned in, an interesting conversation with Andy Mayer, he's an energy expert from the Institute of Economic Affairs, about those blackouts across Spain and Portugal. And earlier spoke to a caller who's in Andalusia, lost power for almost 24 hours. Very, very scary. But again, turns out they have blackouts all the time, but much shorter blackouts. Again, because that's normal in a first world country. And it is fascinating. Spain, Portugal very much tied to Spain on this front, but both countries massively dependent on renewables for their electricity. More than 50% in Spain of electricity is now from renewables. Yesterday, it was 53% of electricity was from solar, about another 10% was from wind. It does appear as much as it's going to be uncomfortable for those net zero fanatics and Ed Miliband and everyone, it does appear that it looks like the most likely explanation. Not a cyber attack, not some freak weather event. There wasn't one, but actually it was the way the renewables work and a sort of a glitch in the system that is the fundamental unreliability of this system. I'm not going to attempt to explain it. Andy Mayer, we had lots of talk of hamster wheels, which made a lot of sense at the time. But basically, if things just get a tiny bit out of sync, it all goes kaput, is basically, I think, a fair summary. But, you know, again, nice balmy day, not too hot, not a big crisis. Flights can't leave, trains can't run, traffic lights aren't working, cash points aren't working, people can't aircon their homes, they can't have their lights on, they can't heat water, all of these different things going on. If that happened in Britain for 24 hours in the dead of winter on a cold night, people would die. I mean, that's it. On a dark night as well, you know, so they would have had light for a lot of the time when the blackout was happening. And apparently they're used to having these blackouts. Now, we're not used to blackouts. This is very likely to happen here the more we push towards these net zero targets that Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer are set on. Is that worth it? Benjamin, I mean, you're woke as they come.
Well, thank God it happened in April. You're right about if it happened in darkness, that'd be terrible. But it sounds like it was the quality of linking up the system that is weak, rather than simply renewables being the wrong idea.
But it's basically a flaw in the system. The cost of changing the system to make this work would be huge.
But I mean, their energy prices are considerably lower than the ones we have in the UK because we're so reliant on gas, and therefore world events have affected us.
No, that's not why our prices are high in this country.
It absolutely is. The vast majority of our energy prices come from the global gas price.
Our electricity prices are higher because we have this absurd link with gas prices for the final sort of 20 minutes of electricity we need to produce from gas prices. But again, we could produce our own gas, and we could therefore push down. We could have requirements on North Sea gas to be used here. We could take our prices down any time we want it. A lot of it's down to tax as well.
But the tax rate, the sort of so-called net zero green taxes, are a much smaller percentage of our energy bills than in most European countries like France and Germany.
But there are lots of other different tax bills. There are different on the actual companies themselves.
It's not what's driving us up. And I think, you know, Spain is obviously well placed geographically for solar and wind power, and I think it makes sense it's done that.
Well, we're not, though, because it doesn't. I mean, we've got lovely wind.
Got lots of wind.
We talk. No, we don't. That's the weirdest thing.
The studio says otherwise.
I don't know what that's about. But genuinely, in the coldest winter months, we tend to actually, the typical weather in Britain, January, December, January, is actually it's not windy and there's no sun, so it wouldn't work. I mean, I've always said we're heading towards blackouts, and when we have blackouts, everyone will go, oh right, oh fair enough, and we should actually. We're going to need to go to blackouts before people wake up and, as I said, the mainstream media start asking the right questions and stop just pushing climate change nonsense.
I mean, causes aside, I've never seriously thought about the prospect of a blackout, whatever might cause it. So the kind of preparation and the consequences that the caller was saying earlier.
You got your torch,
Well, this thing, I don't keep sort of like biscuits and dry foods and stuff in the house because I would just eat it. So in normal life, that's not a very good idea. But
well, we did give us a report only a few weeks ago that we were all supposed to have, you know, invent of a cyber attack or invent of something. We should have, you know, the wind-up radio, the torch, the bottles of water, the tinned goods.
Yeah, I don't have. I mean, don't bother burgling me. There's no cash under the bed, right? But actually, when you think about it, I use my phone to pay for everything. That would soon not work. And so, are these things that we should think about, based on what these Spanish people have faced?
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
Traffic lights, it never occurred to me. Traffic lights is absolute nightmare.
Our world does not function without electricity now. The modern world does not function. Honestly, we need to start paying attention to this stuff. There are people in government who actually spend all day thinking about this stuff because it's a reality. And also, again, there's still the possibility this could have been a cyber attack. It's exactly the sort of thing that Russia, China, North Korea, and would try out. It's exactly the sort of thing they would do. It's exactly the sort of thing they want to do. We are incredibly at risk of these things. And I find it extraordinary how many people in government, how many people just generally in life just are not prepared for it. I mean, again, even the cyber attacks, again, look at Marks and Spencer's, we had major banks, we've had the NHS experiencing cyber attacks. When everything is electronic, and suddenly none of it works, you think, oh, oh, hold on a minute, I can't. Even if you have a little power outage at home, you know, every now and then you have about it, you think, oh, I don't know, well, let's put the kettle on. Oh, no, can't have a cup of tea. Like, oh, what can we do? And you suddenly realise how much you rely on electricity for all your basics. Let's talk about basic things like ability to protect our country. Small boat crossings passed the £10,000 mark this week. £10,000 mark.
If only.
No, apparently you can get that's 2 people on a boat. It's the earliest point in the year since records began. It took till June to reach this mark last year. Now, the reality is a lot, and I've been pointing this out to Tories and Labour ministers over the years, the number of people who cross seems to have a damn sight more to do with the weather and the sea conditions in the Channel than it does to any policy. But nevertheless, Rishi Sunak said he'd stop the boats. He didn't. Keir Starmer promised to smash the gangs. He hasn't. This was a massive issue for voters at the last general election. Do you think in any way that Labour are going to be able to tackle this?
Well, I hope so. And if you're being sympathetic, reasonable maybe, then what were the chances you were going to dismantle organised international crime in 9 or 10 months? You know, that wasn't likely. And they didn't say it would happen overnight.
Well, when realistically, what, by 29?
Well, I mean, the fact that the numbers have basically doubled at this point in the year compared to 2 years ago, what that says is that, you know, it's understandable they haven't smashed the gangs in 10 months, fine, but it would look like the gangs are more organised and more effective and have more people willing to take the risk than ever before. And I think that should alarm us. They've got this new suggestion, though, that if you get a sex offence, then you will be gone.
If you're a foreigner?
Yeah, if you're a foreigner.
No, but if you get, if you're a sex offender and you're British, we're stuck with you. Well, but the idea is that you don't know. It doesn't know. That's the thing. It doesn't say you should be gone. Yes, if you're a foreign sex offender, you would be barred from gaining asylum. But the reality is there are plenty of foreign sex offenders and other offenders who don't have asylum but still get the right to stay here.
I mean, I can't imagine what the logic was. I think there's some audacity. The news story in which this has the shadow Home Secretary, I think he is, Chris Philp, saying it's a disgrace that this was still possible. Well, mate, it's only possible because you were
a Home Office Minister.
Exactly. So there's some audacity there.
But again, I don't understand why just sex offenders. Why not any criminal offence?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, more than okay. We can debate over shoplifting or not, but I'm going third shoplifting offence, definitely. You're out. Bye. But genuinely, I would literally
really winds me up.
I know exactly. I would literally just put people on a boat and go, bye. We're just going to ship you over to Calais. Off you go. Off you get. Just not a problem.
And there's a compassionate argument for that too, because if you want to take in people that have been through hell, an interpreter that helped British forces in Afghanistan and wants safety, if you want to take them and want to make space and money for those people that have helped us and are decent and have been through hell, well, then you can't take 12 sex offenders from another country.
Yeah, exactly. I just find it extraordinary that anyone thinks we can.
Also, the main foreign nationality right now is Vietnamese. They're not at war, they're just poor. No. It's not the same thing.
No, exactly. Again, I've always said most of these people are economic migrants. Anyway, just finally, I want to talk about, there's a Lib Dem MP, she's the MP for Bath, Vera Hobhouse. She's sponsored a new report from Migrant Democracy Project. You can just guess what they're like. I can see exactly what they're wearing. You know exactly. There's lots of big brooches, aren't there? She's backing a new campaign that would hand the vote to over 4 million people from abroad, including people who arrived in Britain illegally. They argue that Britain's current electoral system fails to represent millions of people in the UK who cannot participate in elections. No, because they're not citizens. That's why. Because you don't get to vote because you're not a citizen. Doesn't matter where you live. This is properly insane.
Yeah, I mean, we have a bar for getting a vote and it's called citizenship, and it's every sovereign nation runs on that. Obviously, when we're in the EU, you've got local elections, votes for EU residents, but that was reciprocal. So, if you went to Spain in that time, you'd get the same thing in return. So, you can understand that.
You could vote in European elections,
precisely,
I think, but again, not in the referendum, and that's something, again, Labour want to, this is a Lib Dem MP, but Labour want to extend voting to kids 16 and 17, which, again, I find absolutely insane as well. We just have 18-year-olds who are citizens in this country and not behind bars seems to me to be, or certified insane, seems to be about right.
Now, are you barred if you're insane?
I believe you are if you're certified. I think you are certifiably insane, as opposed to just, a Lib Dem MP calling for this sort of madness. 11:25 is the time. Up next, going to get to your calls coming in thick and fast on Mark Carney and Donald Trump and you name it. But get in touch if you want to have yours say 0344 499 1000 is the number to call.
last report, it was found that about 1/3 of children who presented themselves at the Tavistock Gender Clinic had autism or some other neurodivergent condition. So that was there and that was known, but there was an appalling lack of curiosity. Rather than say, is this just an outworking of the child's neurodiverse behaviour, neurodiverse condition, clinicians seem to think, well, it just means they're trans, and move forwards without asking the right questions.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:27 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get to your messages and your phone calls coming in about various different topics, including today marking Donald Trump's 100th day in office. I'm asking what his biggest achievements and mistakes are so far. Graham says, biggest achievement in the border plus girls sport, biggest failure, Ukraine and the tariffs. Yeah, you know what? I'll agree with you on that. John says this 100 days thing is nonsense, not an effective way to measure someone's presidency. Give it a year at least. Well, you say that, John, but actually what a lot of presidents, lots of prime ministers have learnt over the years, actually you get most done when you hit the ground running and you get that stuff done and you stop the inertia of the blob, the civil servants, from stopping you doing stuff. And actually often it's the most stuff you ever do get done, especially, by the way, if he should just be at the end of his time as president, because he's not allowed to run whatever he thinks for a third term as president, in which case, by the midterms you become a lame duck president. So he's got a little less time than many would think to get stuff done. Mark says reduced illegal immigration massively is a big achievement. Rallied the Canadian people behind a rabid lefty like Mark Carney. Yeah, Mark Carney's lefty when it comes to, which delicatessen he goes to, but he's not and being all right on about migrants and things, but he's not. I mean, he's a Goldman Sachs banker, guys. Come on. Steve says, I like Trump, but as for achievement, there's only one so far: deporting illegals on a big scale. Failures: stopping the Russian advance in Ukraine, worldwide tariffs which backfired on him, and he's had to make U-turns on many of them. And Nathan says, Trump says a lot, but really he doesn't do a lot. I like Trump, but he's beginning to think he's the world's messiah. Yeah, the ego does bother me, I have to say. Let's go to the phone calls now, and Kevin is in London. Kevin, you want to talk about Mark Carney's victory. What do you want to say?
Well, yes, about him and also Trump's suggestion that maybe Canada could become the 51st state.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that Mark Carney's newfound enthusiasm for national sovereignty is a wonder to behold.
Isn't it? Didn't seem to care about it when he was here, did he?
Exactly. But one thing, I mean, it's a semi-serious suggestion, but it might be quite fun to do it. Suppose Carney were to call Trump's bluff and say, look, Mr. President, thank you for your interest, but let's forget about this 51st state rubbish. In Canada, we have various provinces and territories, about 10 of them in all, I think. Now, if they rejoined the USA, then if each of those was a state, then we may possibly have a deal subject to the agreement of the Canadian people. Yeah. So the number of states in the Union goes up from 50 to 60. The number of senators goes up from 100 to 120. And I mean, I think if I were Canadian, I still don't think I would vote in favour of that. Yeah. But, if you're thinking of the arguments, then from the point of view of geography and demographics, language, legal traditions, many things. I mean, you could argue
they've got quite a lot in common. Here's the thing, though. I mean, again, very different. The healthcare system, and actually, Canada is far closer to the sort of European model than it is to the American model. But what would be interesting was how much that would change American politics. And as you said, there's no way that the whole of Canada would be just one state. That would never. But it would. That would I would think give a pretty strong Democrat bias, wouldn't it, to the election?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I was going to say is that whether or not you think there's a strong argument for that, I would say it's a stronger argument than the argument that Britain should be in the European Union for all sorts of. But yes, I mean, the number of senators goes up from 100 to 120. That's a massive. A lot of American presidential elections have been fairly close-run things. Yep. Canada could have a massive effect if it were to become part of the USA. And as I say, I mean, it would be interesting. At least it would be a realistic option to to explore.
Yeah, I like the idea of calling the bluff. Go, OK, then let's start the talk. So that would be fascinating. I love that, Kevin. Thank you very much, Dean. And it's such a good point about Carney, who feels terribly strongly about national sovereignty when it's Canada, but apparently not when it's Britain dealing with Brussels. Let's go to Dave, who's on the line in London. Hi, Dave. What do you want to say?
Hi, Julia. I was just when I was listening to you and your guest, Mr. Lefty Benjamin, whatever his name is.
Oh, be nice. Play nicely.
That's not an insult, Julia.
Well,
it is an insult.
You were kind of sort of saying, "Oh, Carney. Well, he hasn't been elected. This is so bizarre." I just wanted to remind you guys that most of our country isn't run by the elected politicians anymore. Exactly. It's run by heads of quangos, people that are put into places like Miliband to go and do damaging things. Lawyers from the UK, lawyers from Europe. I don't think our country, I don't think whoever you elect, it makes any difference anymore. And as for these MPs, many more than Canada and America, obviously, even though we're a sixth of the size, I know they're elected as part of a democracy, but 80% of people who vote go down to the polling booth. They don't even know who their local MP is. They couldn't care less. They're just running their finger down which party I want to vote for. So even these politicians that say, I've been elected by my constituents. No, you haven't.
They just voted for the red rosette or the blue rosette, didn't they? But you're right on the unelected quangos. I mean, the story yesterday about, we spoke to 350 of them are on more money than the Prime Minister running a quango. We send us in council, they get to decide policy. Oh, do they? Oh, OK, nothing to do with our elected representatives then. All these tribunals that are saying, absolutely, you're a paedophile, you're a drug dealer, violently assaulted people, absolutely stay in the country, not a problem. You've got a right for your family life here. I mean, these people, Climate Change Committee, are completely unelected. The woman who runs that, I think, has got a classics degree. She hasn't even got a science degree, telling us basically that we should run our economy and our manufacturing into the ground and risk blackouts like Spain and Portugal by going to 100% renewables. I mean, as you say, not accountable to any of us.
No, and also you mentioned this story coming out where 4 million people should be given the right to vote. And I think Benjamin said something like, well, no, you need to be a citizen. Well, no, you don't, because Starmer's about to drop it to the age of 16. So he is messing around.
They're still citizens.
Things.
I mean,
they kind of are, but so are 12-year-olds. So give it to 12.
Oh yeah, no, but I mean they're kids. I mean that's it. I've got a really sharp, bright. She's now 18, but even when she was 12, she knew more about politics than I think most adults did. Still didn't think she should have the vote. Why? Because she's a kid.
Well, exactly, and it's just gerrymandering to try and to stay in power. It's got nothing to do with young people need a stake in the economy.
Exactly.
It's a load of rubbish.
I tell you what though, given that more and more of them are saying they'd vote reform and could have gone to the polls, particularly young boys, I think they might move away from that. But my thing is, even if I thought every single one of those young people was going to vote however I would vote, I still wouldn't think it was right, because they're not adults. You can't say you can't buy a cigarette or a pint of beer. You can't drive a car even to the age of 17, but you can absolutely have a say in who runs our country. What a load of abject nonsense.
The only way I would accept it is if we say, OK, if you give the 16-year-olds the vote, they are now eligible for adult prison. The day they get the vote, everyone that's 16 in a Young Offenders Institute is moved into an adult prison. We'll see how many people then who've got kids of the age of 16 think, oh, no, wait a minute, I don't think I want that consequence. Well, that's the one you're going to get. If you want 16-year-olds, they go to prison, end of story.
I like to think most of us are hoping our children don't end up in prison, but there we are. David London, thank you very much. 11:35 is the time. Benjamin, do you want to come back in on being a lefty, Benjamin?
I'm the radical centre, that's what I always say.
Radical centre. But the centre ground of British politics right now is properly full-on, mad, radical and extremist. Men are women, women are men. Let's completely and utterly damage our economy with net zero madness. I mean, let's have open borders. The centre ground of British politics is properly extremist now. It's not something to be proud of.
I think it's harder to work out. I dare say that, I mean, you can see it with Reform UK, because they talk about nationalising industries like steel and maybe further.
That's a very popular policy on left and right.
Yeah, meanwhile being sort of anti-mass immigration. So, that shows where the centre ground is moving. I think we live in the end of Thatcherism. I suspect that's the defining feature of it, because globalisation is collapsing.
Very interesting. 11:36 is the time. Your calls welcome on. You should just call up and just be horrible. horrid to Benjamin. That's all part of the fun. He knows the deal. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking to the Centre for Migration Control's Robert Bates about sex offenders, amazingly, who come from abroad, being barred from gaining asylum here. A whoopity-doo-dah, and that extraordinary 10,000 people arriving on those migrant boats across the channel already this year. How's those gangs going, being smashed? It's going really well, isn't it, Keir? Well done, mate. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:39 is the time. Let's go straight to Robert Bates now. He's a research director at the Centre for Migration Control and joins us to talk about, all things illegal migrants. Very, very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, there's an awful lot of stories. I want to start, though, with the small boats crossings. The small number of people crossing the country this year has crossed the 10,000 mark. It's the earliest point in the year since records began. I mean, it was about 5,000 this time last year, or a couple of years ago, and now it's at 10,000. They had to get to June for that. Now, a lot of that may be we've had balmy, calm conditions, and that's made it easier. But there's no doubt at all those gangs have not been smashed by Keir Starmer, have they?
Far from it. And when you look at what the actual impact that smashing the gangs has had, which has perhaps meant that there's been a short supply of dinghies occasionally, well, that's something that's been circumnavigated quite easily because we now see that the boat sizes have increased astronomically. The numbers of people coming in on boats have increased nearly by 50% in some instances. So we need to realise that where we are now is in a much worse situation than where we were this time last year. At least last year, although the Conservative Party really did botch the Rwanda plan by failing to commit to leaving the ECHR, at least there was a recognition that if you want to stop people coming across the channel, you need to have a strong deterrent in place. Fortunately, of course, the first thing the Labour Party did when they came into government was to scrap that and to focus all their efforts on the people smugglers rather than actually addressing those flows. And the result is, as we're seeing 10,000 hit, more early than at any point in any other year, 41% up on this time last year, and there doesn't seem to be anything in sight that would actually start to.
I mean, we were told, weren't we? Keir Starmer was just saying, look, the Tories just didn't have good relations with the French, and you have to have a conversation with Macron, you have to negotiate, you have to, actually just, talk to people. That was going to solve it. I mean, great. It's just not working out as well as many had planned. I mean, how much worse is it going to get?
Well, I think on current trends, we probably will hit 50,000 this year. I could well see, without anything changing dramatically, we will be reaching a record high of that. And that, of course, then puts us in a very perilous situation over the course of this Parliament, where we could see up to 250,000 people coming across the Channel. Of course, that's a forecast going forward. But you're absolutely right. The idea that the French were going to bail us out of this problem was absolutely pie in the sky. Yeah. Thinking we've sent them, £500 million to try and address some of those crossings. We've seen very little return on investment on that. They've done very little. They've been handing out life jackets in some instances as well. The fact of the matter is that if you want to solve the illegal migration crisis gripping your country, you have to take measures yourself. You can't rely on other people to solve it for you. That's not something that Keir Starmer seems prepared to do. He's got this commitment to international collaboration. He likes to see himself as a statesman in that regard. Yeah, but again, it's like we could all collaborate. Yeah, great. But it turns out all the collaboration seems to be with the smuggling gangs, because we've got the latest stats in terms of the huge amounts of money being spent on the migrant hotels. I mean, we had this absurd story yesterday, over the weekend. Serco, one of the three big providers of migrant properties. So you've got illegal migrants here claiming asylum here for years. The Labour Party at the last election said we're not going to have people in hotels anymore. Or then people said, well, they're going into private accommodation. That's going to end up being competing with families for the same accommodation. Oh, well, we'll deal with that. No, they're just busy signing contracts with companies like Serco, who then sign contracts with local landlords, offering them 5 years, not 5 months, 5 years guaranteed rent, paying all the utilities, council tax, paying everything guaranteed. Double the local rent. What a surprise. Makes it even harder for local people to rent those homes themselves. Why would a landlord go to a local person when they can guarantee that income from Serco and from the taxpayer? They are, it would appear, whatever they say to us in public, gearing up for this to be for the long haul. Well, exactly, and that is the big change with these contracts, the fact that they're now 5 years that landlords will be paid the rent for individuals being housed. And I think that it really is, in a way, an admittance of defeat from the Labour Party, that they realise that they won't be able to bring the asylum backlog down under manageable control over the course of this Parliament. Of course, they're actually introducing measures as well that would make it more difficult for them to clear the backlog, to make sure that those hotels are empty. They're meaning those individuals that get refugee status eventually have a longer period of time to stay in those hotels once their asylum application is approved. So they're doing really all they can to clog up the hotel system. The use of houses, as it now seems, of course, has huge impacts on local communities, not just in terms of the pressure, but in terms of individuals now being placed in these areas as well.
It seems like they just want the problem to sort of go away from the front pages. And if you don't notice it, if people are just in these homes, as opposed to in a hostel, and everyone can see there's crowds of, young men, outside a hostel, it's more noticeable and people could complain about it. And just make it kind of go away and dissipate somehow in the community. People won't notice. People are going to notice. One thing they've also noticed is the fact that we've seen story after story after story of people who commit offences, who come to this country, commit offences, and then allowed to stay in this country. And just again and again and again, especially these higher tribunal decisions. But announcement from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, today that asylum seekers will be denied the right to stay in the UK if they've been convicted of sexual offences. Apparently that wasn't the case already. Terrorists, war criminals and any other criminals whose offences carry a sentence of 1 year or more can already be refused asylum under the Refugee Convention. But under these changes, that'll be extended to someone who commits a sexual offence, which would, regardless of the length of their sentence. I mean, I think most people are just flabbergasted that wasn't already the case. For me, I'm thinking even, even shoplifting, certainly a third offence shoplifting, bye, you're out. But the reality is we can refuse these people asylum as much as we want. We can have it all the niceties in black and white in the law, but it doesn't actually mean these people ever get thrown out of the country.
No, quite right. I mean, I'm glad that the government is finally recognising some link between crime and open borders. That's something we've been talking about for quite a while, but it seems to have taken them a while to cotton on. The key point in these plans, of course, is that they have shortened the length that an immigration tribunal judge has to process these asylum claims that will inevitably, and these legal claims that will inevitably result from those
haven't they shortened it to something like 24 weeks? So basically half a year still.
Well, exactly. You've still got a fair old period of time to gather your case. And of course, we know from those endless examples that we get given that the immigration tribunals are hardly on the side of the British public when it comes to actually seeing common sense and removing these individuals. You're absolutely right as well. Why are we just stopping at those that have committed sexual offences? It should be individuals that have come into this country and then, committed any crime. there's, of course, the other point as well, that if many of these individuals will have come in to the country in this regard with these plans illegally, and therefore they shouldn't have been given the opportunity in the first place to commit sexual crimes as well. So, there's a whole manner of loopholes and problems with this plan. I think it's been brought out because, of course, we have elections later this week. We have seen horrible news stories such as the 10,000 mark being reached, and they're trying to cover their tracks and to see it look like they're looking tough. Yeah,
I just don't think anyone's going to believe any of the main parties on this anymore. Just finally, I must ask you about the Lib Dem MP Vera Hobhouse. She's the MP for Bath in the West Country, and she has backed a campaign that would hand the vote to over 4 million new people, in not just foreign citizens, but also those who have arrived here illegally. And it's a new report from the Migrant Democracy Project, and she's sponsored the report and launched in Parliament. And basically, they say, look, millions of people aren't represented, and migrant residents should have the right to vote. I mean, the whole point of the nation state is that citizens have certain rights by dint of their citizenship. And basically saying, yeah, if you can get here, you get a say in how the country's run. That is madness.
Exactly. The whole point of having a vote is you have a stake in society. You want it to do well. You're casting. It's a responsibility. It's something you take seriously. This is electoral gerrymandering. I mean, these illegal migrants aren't going to be voting for the Reform or Conservative Party, are they? So it's clearly a recognition that the Lib Dems rely on others to
although they'd have to register to vote, and we might know where they are, which would be useful. But there we are. Robert Bates, thank you very much indeed. We'll take a quick break now. Up next, we're going to be talking about why Labour MPs and indeed doctors are railing against that Supreme Court decision on what a woman is. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The split in politics, I think, is between those who love this country, believe in this country, want to protect, promote and celebrate this country and everything that once made it great. And I put myself firmly in that camp, and I put you in that camp. Yeah. And then there's a camp like Starmer and others who actually hate this country. They hate where this country came from. They hate the history of this country.
Why don't they start off and live somewhere else? Why don't they go and live somewhere else then?
Well, actually, Jeremy, they're trying to bring somewhere else here. That's what they're doing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Let's get straight to my next guest, and let's talk about why so many people seem to be very upset with the Supreme Court for their rather clear ruling about what the law not only is, but has always been when it comes to women's biologically sex-based rights. It seems that not just Labour MPs, but doctors are unhappy with that decision. Let's talk to Emma Hartley, no relation, who's a campaigner at the Women's Rights Network. Good morning to you, Emma.
Hi, hello.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Let's start with the Labour MPs, because we've got 4 Labour MPs, usual suspects, Nadia Whittome and others, who've signed a motion basically arguing that the Supreme Court decision is basically, transphobic and is an issue, and are rather angry, it would seem, at the Prime Minister for apparently accepting the Supreme Court ruling. What are they saying?
So I think it's quite extraordinary, really, what they're saying, because they seem to be saying that the clarity that the Supreme Court judgment has given us is somehow hateful, divisive, transphobic, when actually, as public policymakers, which they are, they should see that this is actually a really important thing for the rights of trans people, the rights of women, because it gives them clear categories to now make good laws, make good policies that actually consider the rights of everybody.
Well, exactly. And again, the Supreme Court were very, very clear to talk about in no way does this mean people can discriminate against trans people. It simply points out that the rights of women to single-sex spaces are only available to women and not to men who think they're women, and to, and likewise for single-sex spaces for men. It's Nadia Whittome, Charlotte Nichols, Kate Osborne, Olivia Blake. They signed a statement, basically a trans right pledge. They say that criticises divisive Supreme Court trans ruling. They said that lesbian rights do not conflict with those of transgender people, even though we know 40% of, until this point, 40% of people who are on, lesbian online dating websites are actually men, often men with a beard, saying, "Well, I'm a trans woman with a penis, but I think you're a bigot if you don't have sex with me." I mean, clearly those are in conflict, are they not? They say, "We affirm our unwavering commitment to the dignity, safety and liberation of lesbian and trans people in all their diversity, and stand united against all forms of transphobia, lesbophobia," didn't know that was even a thing, "and misogyny. There's no pride in exclusion." But the whole point was this wasn't, again, this is an interesting thing, this wasn't a ruling about trans people, it was a ruling about women. Not everything is about you, trans people, I would say. It was about women's rights, and where women's rights are, where trans rights conflict with women's rights are upheld by the 2010 Equality Law. Why do they think this is so divisive and transphobic?
Well, I think they just failed to understand what it actually means. They haven't seemed to thought about it properly, because actually this ruling is better for trans people and it's better for women. The Supreme Court saying that any other understanding of what women use in the Equality Act would be incoherent. How they can then repeat this again and again is just bizarre. Just because you repeat something over and over doesn't make it true.
Well, it is the same people who say, J.K. Rowling's transphobic, and you say, can you give me an example when she says trans women are not women? It's like, well, that's not transphobic. That's A, biological fact, and B, the law. So it's not transphobic. It doesn't have any meaning, does it?
Absolutely. And if me saying that women as a sex class matters makes me transphobic, then I think so be it. It kind of undermines what transphobia means in the first place.
Well, exactly.
If everything's transphobic. Exactly.
Facts don't have feelings or care about feelings. Indeed, I'm fascinated to see that doctors, junior medics at the British Medical Association have kind of joined in this. They've called the Supreme Court trans ruling, in their words, scientifically illiterate. This is a motion which was passed at the conference on Saturday, criticised the ruling as biologically nonsensical. They say that the binary divide between sex and gender has no basis in science or medicine, while also being actively harmful to transgender and gender diverse people. Now, this is rather terrifying, because I don't think these people should be allowed to practice as doctors, and I definitely think that no one should want to see a doctor or allow your child to see a doctor who doesn't understand the difference between the biological sexes.
Yeah, absolutely. It just undermines their credibility entirely. And I think that's why them coming out and saying that is pretty nonsensical. With the puberty blockers already, there's all the scandals involved with that's undermining the medical profession. We need doctors. They are just letting themselves down and just undermining trust. I think this is the problem with gender ideology in general. It shows how it's undermining trust in our institutions, and the fact that the BMA are coming out and saying that, it just highlights how deep this has got. And actually, if we hadn't had the Supreme Court ruling, all of the vulnerable women that are suffering because of these policies would continue to suffer. We keep talking about toilets, but actually it's about the most vulnerable women on hospital wards. It's the women that have biological women that need smears.
Don't say biological women. We're just women.
Just
There's
women.
only one
Yeah,
kind.
absolutely.
We're
No, I
not a
agree.
subset. I've always said to people, do not use. Don't.
Yeah.
When women started saying females, no, we keep on. We don't let them steal our word. It's our word. We're the only kind. No, but you're right. It's like refuges, prisons. Right now, today, there are men claiming to be women who are allowed in women's prisons in this country. That is an outrage. And by the way, did you see Rory Stewart in his whatever his mad podcast with Alistair Campbell is? And Rory Stewart, was former prisons minister who, while he was prisons minister, said that there had been cases. He admitted, and it's been proven in court, there have been cases of supposed trans women, i.e. men who claim to be trans, many of whom, by the way, have been convicted of sex assaults on women before they go into prison, who then miraculously discover they think they're women, very conveniently, put a wig on. They go into a women's prison, and there have been cases where they have sexually assaulted women prisoners who are highly vulnerable to attack in those circumstances when they're put behind bars in a cell. He's admitted that. And then he was saying in his podcast about this that this wasn't the most important issue. Well, maybe for you, Rory, as a bloke, not such a worry.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's extraordinary as well how they'll sort of talk about trans people but won't actually define what they are. And I think coming back to the doctors, that's part of the issue is doctors are used to working with symptoms and, really clear, these are the symptoms, so therefore this is the diagnosis and this is the treatment options. And actually, like that's where when you say trans woman, well, what do you actually mean when you talk about that? Because actually we can objectively measure a category of women and therefore we can understand the policy that we need to support them. And in the same way, but I actually think that's where the conversation should go. Okay, so what is a trans woman? Because if it's self-identifying, then that actually makes it really difficult, because if you have a patient come in unconscious, you don't go, oh, maybe they're trans, because if they're unconscious, they can't tell you. You go, they're male or female, i.e. they're a man or they're a woman. And you
treat them and you give them drugs. I mean, again,
absolutely.
different amounts of drugs, different kinds of treatments based on that biological reality rather than a feeling. And again, I just find it terrifying. We had, I think the American, I think British Psychological and Psychiatric Associations massively backing, the idea that there are trans children and they need to be treated, supporting puberty blockers, gender affirming care, as they call it, which has basically been drugging and mutilating children's bodies for a political ideology. I mean, it is absolutely appalling. And I thank God we've got some sanity coming back in this country, but we clearly got to fight back against some lunatic MPs and some very, very, very scary medics as well.
Yeah, very privileged medics, I think. I think it's very much a luxury belief.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a belief system. So,
absolutely. Emma Hartley, thank you so much for joining us. Campaign at Women's Rights Network. Thank you for that. Benjamin Butterworth, come on. There you go. You got go out 30 seconds. Talk your nonsense. Go on.
No, but these women who I think all of them are bisexual are speaking up for lesbians, because lots of people have been speaking for women who are attracted to women and telling them that they're threatened when actually the vast majority don't take that view.
The Lesbian and Gay Alliance,
which doesn't represent lesbian or gay people.
Well, it does.
I mean, it opposes the idea of LGBT inclusive education in schools. It opposes loads of things.
No, inclusive. No. Here's an idea. I'm not homophobic at all, but I also don't want my child being constantly told everyone's on the spectrum, everyone's gay, 15 different sexes and genders and that. It's a load of nonsense.
Well, I'm literally a homosexual, and I would say
literally. You represent yourself. I represent me as a woman. You represent you as a gay man.
But I don't think you speak for lesbians.
I don't think I speak for lesbians. No,
most of them wouldn't take your view, and I know that.
Well, you know that because you know all the lesbians.
No.
What about the lesbians being told they're bigots because they won't have sex with a man? Well, I mean, in the 1950s, you would have been complaining about that. We're up against the clock. We're going to talk about this later. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 2 minutes past midday. Have we got a rip-roaring next hour for you? Coming up, we're going to be talking about that victory for Mark Carney's Liberals in the Canadian election. A huge political comeback for Mark Carney, but actually, was the election really won by Donald Trump? Because his threats of making Canada the 51st state of the United States seem to put something of a leap into the step. Spring into the step of Mark Carney, and meant that Pierre Poilievre of the Conservatives lost out. We'll be talking about that up next with Sebastian Gorka, who's a senior advisor to President Trump in the White House. Also going to talk to him about Donald Trump marking his first 100 days in office. Well, what have his biggest achievements been and what have his biggest failures have been? We'll talk about that. Plus, Labour is set to face, we're told, a summer of discontent as teachers, nurses and council workers have issued strike warnings after Chancellor Rachel Reeves ruled out any extra cash for departments for public sector pay rises of up to 4%. And Meghan Markle, her again. She apparently is continuing to use her HRH title despite an agreement when the couple left Britain that with Buckingham Palace that she would not use that title as a non-working royal. Does that matter, though? We'll talk about that. Plenty more besides. Benjamin Butterworth is still with me. He's a journalist and broadcaster. Thank you once again for joining us.
Good afternoon, Julia.
We're in afternoon. That was very polite. Good afternoon. I know we always have to remember the afternoons, don't we? I'd love to hear from you as well. Great to get your calls in about Donald Trump's 100th day in office. What are his biggest achievements? What are his biggest mistakes so far? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK, then your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one, standard network rate message. It'd be great to hear from you. Lots of you getting in touch on text and tweet as well. Coming up, I say lots more to talk about. I do want to get back on the trans issue with Benjamin Butterworth. We know might come up with my next guest. I'm delighted to welcome to the show once again Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to President Donald Trump and now a Senior Director in the White House for counter-terrorism. A very good afternoon to you, Sebastian.
Greetings, Julia. Greetings. Great to see you again.
Lovely to speak to you. Thank you. Okay, we always go hammer and tongs, but we love each other, really. Sebastian, so much to talk about. Can we start, first of all, with that victory for Mark Carney in the Canadian election? He became the Prime Minister of Canada without even being an elected representative in Canada. He spent more of his time abroad than he spent in Canada. He's a Goldman Sachs banker, Mr. Liberal globalist, anti-Brexit, didn't care about national sovereignty when it came to abject lies about what would happen if the UK voted to leave the EU. Now massively cares about national sovereignty for Canada. Did Donald Trump win him the election, and was that his plan?
Well, maybe it makes it easier to turn Canada into the 51st state of America, but joking aside, it's sad. I mean, that was a very good summary about what Canada faces potentially now with this choice. But, that's up to the Canadians. So they have chosen, they've made their bed, and now they have to line it. But I'm far more excited about talking about what we've done in the White House in the last 100 days and what sadly has happened to our Canadian friends north of the border.
Well, OK, I want to talk a lot about the 100 days, but nevertheless, the threat of becoming the 51st state of the United States, that clearly played a big role, as did the Trump tariff war as well. Was that a tactical mistake by Donald Trump? Wouldn't he have preferred to have the Conservative Pierre Poilievre far more aligned to his political views? Wouldn't he prefer to have him in office in Canada?
Well, I don't think it's clear exactly why the Canadians chose the way they chose. I mean, maybe it's simply they haven't arrived at the place where they're able to reject wokeism as the Brits did with Brexit, or as we did when a man came down an escalator and said, "I want to make America great again." So, I mean, this is the scourge of Western civilization. Those who hate their own nation, who don't believe in sovereignty, who genuflect at the altar of political correctness, don't believe in freedom of speech. I mean, think of what the prior incumbent did. shut down bank accounts
of
the lorry drivers who had received charitable donations as they were fighting for the survival of their industry and really for the autonomy of the Canadian state. That's what Trudeau did. Maybe Canadians want more of that. If they do, I'm saddened as somebody who believes in freedom of speech. And, you know, when I had my radio show, I was super excited when the truck drivers used to ring into my show live. So maybe just Canada's not ready for that level of maturity, and they made this decision.
You get the leaders you vote in and who you deserve. I have to say, it still blows my mind how many people in Britain, I think probably America as well, who aren't aware of what Trudeau did and simply are not aware of it because it just was not covered and it wasn't criticised by other world leaders, including our own Prime Minister here. Let's talk, though, about Donald Trump, because he's always in the news. Doesn't matter what he does. If he's silent, he's in the news. If he speaks, he's in the news. If he writes something on Truth Social, he's in the news. First 100 days in office, there's no doubt at all, he got straight to work on day one. I mean, in the first few hours, he was signing these executive orders, you know, one after the other, one after the other. A lot of people very excited about the things he did in his early days. Just tell us what you think his chief successes have been in those first 100 days.
How many hours do we have, Julia? I mean, in the general domain of things outside of national security, which is, you know, where I live in a skiff in a secure compartmented information facility for most of my working day, it's, I think, the economy, it's the tariffs, and it's securing the border. The fact that we have completely slashed illegal immigration by more than 95%. The fact that we have identified and neutralized and deported hundreds of thousands of the worst criminals. I was in the Situation Room under the West Wing yesterday morning with the National Security Advisor when I was informed about these wanted posters that had been put out on the North Lawn of the White House with the mugshots and the descriptions of just a handful of the people that we have intercepted and put on those plane loads out of the country. And it's horrific. I posted it on my Twitter account, on my Instagram account. I mean, you know, the rape of children, fentanyl deaths, human trafficking, and these are the people that the other side of the aisle are trying to defend now and saying, oh, they didn't get due process and you've got to bring them back from El Salvador.
Well, no. The due process argument about El Salvador has actually involved, you know, people who did have the right to stay in the country, and even in case one US citizen.
No, incorrect. The individual they're describing as a Maryland father who was actually twice deemed by an immigration court to be here illegally has no right to be here. He's a member of MS-13. So no, it's not about Americans who have the right to be here. It's about people who cross the border illegally, are members of gangs that we designated on day one as terrorist gangs and should be removed from the country and have been removed from the country.
I would certainly agree with you that I think that dealing with the immigration issue, the border issue, and I want to come back to that in terms of your advice to our Prime Minister on that. But you mentioned the economy and tariffs. Now, the economy is not in a great shape as a result of those tariffs. You're still supporting the tariff plan. Look, massive tariffs on China. There are geopolitical issues going on there, and a lot of us would support those in terms of the threat from China that's not been recognised by many world leaders. But, however, taking on close allies like Mexico and Canada and Europe and Britain and putting tariffs on them, I still don't understand what is the actual purpose of doing that.
Well, it's very simple. You use the phrase close ally. Really? Canada, and let's talk about the facts, Canada has levied between a 200% and 300% tariff on U.S. dairy produce. So how much of an ally is Canada when you are punishing American farmers? Likewise, Japan, whose security is really a function of what we do in the Pacific. Let me give you another little data point. American rice, and we grow a lot of rice in this country, is taxed at a rate of 700% by our friends in Japan. So all we're doing is we're saying, if you want to be a friend, behave like a friend, do not punish our products, and we are leveling the bar. We're getting back to a state where we're no longer the world's piggy bank and you don't get to exploit us or punish our producers. That's all the president's doing, and God bless him for doing it.
We're told, you know, 75 now, it's 100 countries around the world are busy desperately trying to get some sort of trade deal with the United States. How close to the front of that queue is Britain?
I've said it in many, many interviews in the last few weeks, and it is a fact. The president has a very special place in his heart for Great Britain for all kinds of reasons, familial and otherwise. And I tried to explain to my friends across the pond that, you know, when everybody else in Europe gets slapped with 20% and you get 10%, maybe you should be grateful for actually getting a better grade in class than everybody else. And it's the beginning of negotiations.
But hold on a minute, we don't have the same tariffs as the EU.
I'm not going to reveal the number of where you are in the queue or in the line, but
are we in the top 10? Are we in the top 10?
I think that's a pretty good guess.
Okay, top 3?
I'm not going any more specific. And it's not up to me. It's up to Scott Bessent, my friend.
He's your good friend.
Treasury.
We're told at this end we could be signing a deal within weeks. Do you think that's viable? We mean weeks. Does that mean 52 weeks? Does it mean 3 weeks? Do you think that's viable? A few weeks' time?
Well, I think you're amongst the bucket that is a priority for the president, for Secretary Bessent, and for Secretary Lutnick. Absolutely.
Okay. In terms of other things, you know, Doge, the cutting back on government expenditure, and just huge numbers of government employees. How's that going? Because we heard, you know, lots and lots of noise and thunder and lightning at the very beginning with Elon Musk. Like, you know, everyone's, you know, you've got a week to reply to an email or you're out. Lots of people losing their jobs. And then we had a lot of sort of row back. Well, no, actually, we need this service. Only we need that. Where are we standing there, especially at a time when I think we're only a few weeks away from Elon Musk leaving government?
Yeah, look, I'm not responsible for Doge. I'm responsible for national security and specifically counterterrorism. But as a taxpayer, I am elated by what Mr. Musk and his team are doing. Just the rampant corruption, the billions of dollars being wasted on woke DEI, critical race theory garbage being rammed down the throat, not just of Americans, but of our foreign allies and friends and partners. The fact that USAID has been shut down, the fact that we are finally having some responsibility amongst the bureaucrats who think they have a job for life. I want to see a lot more of that. And God bless Elon for everything he's done so far and his incredible team who are identifying massive fraud and abuse across government.
Do you think we should do a little bit of that here? I mean, certainly the EU needs it, that's for sure. But do you think we should try a bit of that here in the UK?
I think every nation that, you know, states that they have representative government and they have politicians who say on the hustings that they will be good stewards of the taxpayer funds, I think that the voters should demand that of not only their elected politicians, but their bureaucrats. So this is the second time I've served in the White House, and I can tell you, I can give you chapter and verse of meetings I've been in or chaired across the government where I talk to bureaucrats who've been in those positions for decades and who clearly indicate, oh, presidents come and go, heads of state come and go. I'm going to be in this position after the election. I get to decide. An unelected official, I get to decide what happens with our nation, and that is unconscionable, and that's what we're fixing in America right now.
Certainly seems to be where we are in America, so in Britain as well. What advice would you give Keir Starmer on dealing with illegal immigration? You mentioned how not just the deportations, but at the huge 95% cut in the number of people crossing the Mexican border. We this week have hit 10,000, not in the same league as where you are in America, but 10,000 illegal migrants coming over on those little dinghies across the channel from France. It's a record number for this time of year, partly helped by some pretty nice, unusually balmy weather conditions for us here in the UK right now in April. But nevertheless, a record number after the Prime Minister was elected last July, saying he would smash the gangs. What would be your advice to him on both cutting the number of people coming here, but also being able to get rid of the people who are here illegally?
Well, look, I'm not going to specifically give advice to another head of government, but I'll talk to you about, you know, the personal experience of my family. My family were real refugees. My parents were interrogated for 6 weeks in a refugee camp after they escaped communist Hungary. They had to demonstrate to the civilized world that they weren't a threat to the country that accepted them. That country was the UK. So I would say to any head of state, any government that is considering opening their borders to anyone, that number one, without national sovereignty, without control real physical control of your borders, you do not have a nation. Secondly, the individuals you allow into your country should really be committed to the values that country has espoused and upon which it is founded. If you're coming to somebody else's country and you reject ab ovo the values of that nation, why are you letting those people in? So, you know, the fact is we need to do serious vetting and screening. Any nation that says they're a nation needs to decide under what standards they allow people in. And when they find people who are malefactors, who've snuck in or otherwise found themselves on the soil of your territory, they should be identified and they should be deported, because they could be a threat on the long term to the health of those people in the country who were born there or who came there legally. I go back to the posters, the wanted posters on the White House lawn. When you have illegals who have raped children, murdered 12-year-old girls like Jocelyn Nungare, and after they raped them, strangled them and thrown them in a ditch, nobody like that should live in any civilized country. So take your sovereignty seriously would be my advice to any responsible leader of any country.
Should we also be taking our security seriously? You're a senior director for counter-terrorism. You mentioned your security is your brief. We saw in Spain and Portugal over the last 24 hours a huge blackout across the nation, including both capital cities, for the best parts of 20 or so hours. First, the talk was that it was some sort of freak weather event when there wasn't one. Possible worries that it was cybersecurity, but it turns out it may in all likelihood be as a result of net zero policies, a reliance on unreliable solar and wind power that caused a sort of glitch in the system. Now, we know that Donald Trump has been very clear on the net zero policies and dumping a load of those policies, drill, baby, drill, and the like. Do you think that actually these net zero policies that a lot of countries like Britain, most of Europe are pursuing, are actually a massive threat to our national security?
Completely. Net zero is sheer insanity. Energy is the lifeblood of a country. I remember what it was like when we started to be very serious in the UK under Margaret Thatcher about North Sea oil and the absolute revivification of British manufacturing and the whole economy as a result of that lifeblood, the energy being unleashed for British manufacturers. The same goes here for the US. I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but yes, energy, number one, is the lifeblood of any country. Number two, there are bad actors, not just terrorists, but nation-state actors who are actively, I can't go into details, but every day targeting the infrastructure of our nations, especially the energy grid. Any politician who has any responsibility must take this threat deadly seriously. Think about just losing electricity in your home for a week. What happens? What happens to the elderly? What happens to those who need electricity for any kind of life-preserving machine or anything else, just for the refrigeration of food? Think about the basics of life and how energy is the lifeblood of any economy. Take this seriously, please. I will be in the UK imminently to talk to my colleagues in national security, and I'm sure this will be part of the discussion.
I very much hope so. Just finally, I just want to ask you about Ukraine. We saw that extraordinary image of Donald Trump, your boss, and Zelensky of Ukraine meeting, having a one-on-one talk, much more convivial than it was ahead of the funeral of the Pope in the Vatican, much more convivial than that White House exchange. Is that part of a reset of relations between the US and Ukraine, and perhaps the start of a process where, in my view, and you know my view on this, your president is actually going to get to grips with reality and know that he's being played by Putin and that the country he should be supporting is Ukraine?
Nobody plays Donald Trump, Julia. You need to give it up. Nobody plays Donald Trump, okay? The reset occurred about 2 weeks ago. President Trump, the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, made it clear that we're at a level of frustration with both parties, both Moscow and Kiev, that we're prepared to walk away from this. As a result, you saw what happened in the Vatican, and now we are on the cusp of a deal for peace in Europe that only my boss, President Trump, can give us. So, he's always working for the American taxpayer, and he's always working in the interests of peace. And with that meeting, we are on the very edge of making it happen.
You can get peace by surrendering at any time, but it's a surrender deal that humiliates both Donald Trump and the American people, does it not?
Unless two para wants to deploy to Crimea, nobody's surrendering.
It is a surrender. It's basically saying to Putin,
you don't know what you're talking about.
You can have any land. You can have any land that you invade. That's the message you sent Russia.
When it comes to geopolitics, you have no idea. I'm sorry, Julia. You just don't. You don't have any idea what you're talking about.
I think I've got a lot more than your president.
If you want to see peace in Europe, you will support President Trump. If you want to see the meat grinder continue, then go on saying silly things like we're surrendering.
But the meat grinder, we can stop the meat grinder tomorrow by making sure that Putin knows he can't carry on the killing. The meat grinder was started by Vladimir Putin.
I'm not denying that, but you're not talking about any alternative. What are you
I'm talking about. Yeah, there are plenty of alternatives.
What are you proposing? Are you proposing that American soldiers should die to take back Crimea, or British soldiers?
Even Ukraine hasn't suggested that.
What are you proposing?
A full security guarantee from America and Europe that one step further from no requirement that Ukraine recognises the sovereignty of Russia over Crimea.
To a nation that is in the midst of a war. It's not you are the one denying reality, Julia. I'm sorry. You need to wake up and smell the coffee.
Why on earth should President Zelensky or the Ukrainian people who've sacrificed so much in the last 3 years, why should they trust the word of Vladimir Putin when he's reneged on every single deal so far?
What are you talking
about? Well, exactly. So they need to have a guarantee for their safety.
So what's the alternative? You don't trust them.
You asked me what the alternative was, and I've just told you, and then you said that's nonsense.
You got to stop the war, Julia. You got to stop the war.
No, you need to stop the aggression of Vladimir Putin. Those are two different things.
That's what we're going to do with this peace deal. You need to wake up and just get.
And it's
get
okay for you if Vladimir Putin just basically sorts out his economy, trains up some more troops, and just goes for the next bit of Ukraine next time. You're happy with that?
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Why won't it happen? Why won't it happen?
As long as President Trump is in the
Well, I hate to tell you, he's not going to be in office for more than another 3.5 years.
Explain this to me. Why was Crimea taken under Obama? Why was the rest of Ukraine taken under Biden? But when we were in the White House for 4 years, why did Russia not do anything? That's what you have to understand.
If Putin is so afraid of Donald Trump, why did he bomb civilians in Kyiv only a few days ago?
Because he's in a losing hand right now. This is his last desperate attempt to put himself in a better position before negotiations. It's so obvious what he's doing.
He's not negotiating. He's getting everything he wants.
No, he's not.
What's he not getting?
He's not getting Ukraine.
He's getting 20% of Ukraine.
Julia, you still haven't answered the question.
I did. I answered. You just told me it was nonsense.
It is nonsense.
Security guarantee. You asked me a question, I answered it, and then you told me I haven't answered the question.
It's arrant nonsense is what it is.
Sebastian, I hope you're right, but I fear you're not on this issue, but lots of agreement.
President Trump.
We shall, I wish I could. I wish I could on this. I just hope he wakes up and smells the coffee and realises he's being played by Vladimir Putin. He's got him around his little finger right now. Sebastian Gorka, always so good to talk to you, sir. So appreciate you taking the time. Deputy Assistant to President Trump in the White House, Senior Director for Counter-Terrorism. Very quick word from Benjamin Butterworth. Just on that, and then we'll come back to what he's had to say and take some calls.
Well, it just frustrates me that he seems more animated in criticising Canada than criticising Russia, and that suggests that their priorities are out of line with reality.
Yeah, I mean, that is my worry. That is my worry. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know a lot of you disagree with me on this issue, but always so good to get Seb Gorka on. I so appreciate that. 12:25 is the time. Do get in touch, your thoughts, particularly on Donald Trump's 100th day in office. What could he teach Keir Starmer in his, it's well over 100 days. It just feels like, he's got a 5-year term. It feels like 5 years already. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
voltage is different in Spain. It's a bit less than the UK, I think. So we do have the odd outage now and again. It's not unusual.
Yeah.
And as people who rented holiday apartments know that quite often things trip in Spain if you put 2 or 3 devices on.
Yeah.
So it's just part of life. But then it dawns on you, you just can't do anything, anything at all. And neither your neighbours, and you have no news. I mean, it's scary. And no one keeps these transistor radios, the old thing we used to have with the big fat batteries. No one keeps those anywhere. And in fact, the few that were available were sold out across Spain within an hour.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 12:29. Benjamin Butterworth is still with me. We're going to be talking about the possibility of a summer of discontent coming up very soon, with a possibility of strike threats by public sector workers if they don't get that up to 4% pay rise that some pay review bodies have suggested to them. Also, the latest royal shenanigans as well, basically the non-royals, Meghan and Harry. First up, though, let's get to some of your messages coming in about Donald Trump. Juck says, President Trump has done more for the American people than Starmer has for the UK. All he's done is bankrupt the British taxpayers and businesses. This as Donald Trump marks his 100th day in office. Peter says the world is laughing at him and MAGA. Tricia says they're an amazing mess in 100 days. So much for peace in Ukraine. Marilyn asks why are so many British people against him? He's looking after the American people. Our despicable government couldn't care less about us and is just bleeding the taxpayer dry to look after everyone else. Philip says, no mistakes so far. This is a great administration. Michael agrees that President Trump is doing an awesome job. If the Democrats would just stop trying to undermine him, some great things will happen for our wonderful country. I'm guessing he's talking from the States. Well, let's talk to Christoph, who is in Fife, not in the United States. And you want to react to what Seb Gorka, advisor to Donald Trump, has just had to say. Good morning to you, Good afternoon, sorry, Christoph.
Yeah, good afternoon, Julia. Just so you know, I've just been given a note by my wife which says "be polite." So I'm absolutely on good behaviour.
She didn't give me the same note. I can say what I want.
No, just so you're aware, Julia, I'm not British as such, but I've lived here for a long time. But I was born in the United States, so I'm a US citizen in that respect.
You sound British. You've come over to the dark side very well, I think.
No. For what it's worth, people I was born in Ireland, and people of that set at the time absolutely did not want their children born in Ireland. Yeah. I was born in my uncle's house. Blah blah. But anyway. We are where we are now. I do disagree with you on your view of Trump being played. Now, I'm not being political as such here, but you have to look at his background. He made billions out of real estate. Who do you think he was dealing with in New York? Everyone from the man next door to contractors to the mafia. Here is a man who took the country, he took the city of New York to court. He took the country of Germany to court and he won. A man who took...
Well, his lawyers did that. I have to say, he started off with hundreds of millions. He took over his father's property business. I mean, this is a man, by the way, who lost money running a casino. This has never been heard of before.
This is true. But remember, I'm not British. I don't have this issue that people like you have with failure. Just because you failed, that just means you haven't yet succeeded.
No, I don't have an issue with it. I love that American attitude. I've got I spent some formative years in America. I love the American attitude like that.
But maybe.
But what is your point about Donald Trump and Putin? You said he's not being played by Putin. What evidence do you have for that?
Absolutely. Well, listen, neither of us is in the room, but I just go to a person's track record. He made billions out of real estate.
What's that got to do with Putin? Doing a property deal is not the same as bringing a ceasefire in a war. It's not the same thing.
Well, yes and no, because you are dealing directly with people. You look into the whites of their eyes, and these people, especially someone from Putin's background, will know within seconds whether it's someone. He's a trained killer. He's KGB, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
He will know if someone is weak
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Christoph, in a property deal, one of you wants to build or buy a property and one of wants you sell it. You ultimately have the same view, just questioning what the price is and what the terms are. That's not the same as someone wants to take over an entire other nation state and you do or don't care about whether they do that. And the people who have that nation state, the Ukrainians, don't want you to do that. When you're doing a property deal, you have not necessarily mutually exclusive, demands. When you're dealing with a ceasefire like this, you want Russia running Ukraine and Ukraine running Ukraine are mutually exclusive. It's not the same thing.
No, but listen, what we can say, Trump has been in office for 100 days.
Yeah.
He has literally got people around the table. They might not be agreeing with each other. They might not even be talking with each other. But we can agree they are around the table.
He hasn't got the Russians and Ukrainians around the table. He wouldn't even talk to the Ukrainians for months.
I know what one is speaking figuratively. The point is that there is a conversation that is more than anyone in Europe. That's more than Starmer's done. That's more than Macron's done.
Putin will only have a conversation because he's being offered large chunks of a foreign territory in return for the West surrendering an ally. You can agree a deal with anybody. I can agree a deal with a man who puts a gun to my head and demands my phone and my handbag, and I can do a deal with him by going, have my phone and my handbag, and then he'll go away. We've done a great deal. What a great deal maker I am.
No, that
is exactly what this is.
No, look, Julia, the bottom line is that according to estimates, about 5,000 people are dying a week. 5,000 people dying a week, mainly Russian, but people are dying a week.
That's what happens in wars.
One life lost is too many, and I would say
it's not. Not for saving your country. Or should we not have lost any lives to save Britain from Hitler?
I'm not talking
to liberate Europe.
I'm not here to talk about Britain, what Britain was doing or wasn't doing in the 1940s. That's nothing to do with me.
No, but this idea that every single death is one too many. On the contrary, people fight and die for their country. This is the history of humankind.
This is true, but you're talking to me as if this might be something I don't know. My point is that he is doing his best to broker some sort of peace. This peace will be imperfect, almost certainly imperfect. And if I was Ukraine, what I would do now is I would shake the hand. I would say I will concede the territories of the Donbass, Crimea, etc., which are predominantly Russian.
No, not having that again. Seriously. You know what? If you deport all the children, you abduct them, and then everyone else has to leave because of the violence. Yeah, funnily enough. Again, these are Kremlin talking points. These are not actual facts. I'm going to have to leave it there, Christoph. You stayed politer than I did. There we go. I'm going to really quickly go to another call. I want to go to Andrew in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what do you want to say about Trump's 100 days?
Well done, Julie. You really are running care in the community this morning, aren't you, with yours?
What are you like? What do you want to say? Come on.
So, 100 days, the women's signed into legislation. That's brilliant.
The women and the trans stuff, protecting women's rights. That's an achievement for Trump. Yeah, 100%.
But if you look at your earlier guest and Christian, who was just on there, he's just surrounded himself. It's so sad with yes men. And in relation to Ukraine, when he first spoke to Putin off the record, Putin made him wait an hour in the arse of the deal. That doesn't run. He actually is shown...
And that was for a phone call. They had a booked phone call. Putin kept him waiting. He then kept Witkoff, his aide, waiting, I think, 8 hours. You walk away at that point. You don't put up with that nonsense. That shows where the power lies.
Exactly. And he sent, Kirsty Allsop is lovely, but he's effectively sent Kirsty Allsop to negotiate with the Russians and Iran. He's so out of his depth. It's so tragic. Actually, he is showing that he really actually is incompetent. And of course, around him, everybody's saying you're great. America has never been this weak.
I genuinely, I think it's an embarrassment for America. I like lots of things that Donald Trump's doing, but I think he's so wrong on this, and he deserves stronger people around him saying, no, you are wrong on this, President. Andrew, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. 12:37 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be talking about, are we facing a summer of discontent with strike action in the public sector once again? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 12:40. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth is here. Get his thoughts on what my next guest has to say. Are we heading for a summer of discontent? We've had a couple of those in recent years, have we not, with various strikes from public sector workers? But are we heading to one again? Let's talk to Michael Simmons. He's economics editor of The Spectator. Very good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. Well, we've got these independent pay review bodies who've recommended pay rises of around either 3% or the 4% mark, depending on which public sector workers you are. Some actually more for police officers, soldiers and others who cannot go on strike. But looking at teachers getting 4%, NHS workers around the 3% mark. Now, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, said, well, your budgets are set for your department, so if you're going to give those pay rises, other things will have to be cut back. Of course, otherwise, we'd be facing more tax rises in the autumn, which, let's face it, we probably are, by stealth, or more borrowing, which we can't afford to do. In which case, we've now got the threat of strike threats. How serious do you think those threats are?
Yeah, listen, I think the strike threats are pretty serious. It's certainly going to be an unhappy summer because, as you laid out there, we don't know exactly what the pay review bodies are going to recommend, but in some cases it could be around the 5% mark. And the Treasury has been pretty clear that they will fund up to, I think it's something about 2.8%, which means that difference, each department, each organisation is going to have to decide, do they make cuts to then pay for the rest of that recommendation, in which case services are going to get worse and voters are going to be unhappy, or they're going to try and stand their ground against the unions. And we've seen, over the past few years, certainly under the last government, that the unions are more ready than ever, really, to strike, and they've had success because what did Labour do as soon as they came in? They effectively gave in to most of the
they
demands.
Said, we're just going to get around the table. They got around the table and said, here's some money. This isn't the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't, in a way, you can't blame the unions. Their tactics work. So I think they're going to keep doing them. I think speaking to people in Labour, there was a feeling that some of the unions would maybe go easy on them because they support the Labour Party, but I don't think there's signs that is going to happen. So I think
absolutely not. And here's the thing. And again, we talked about this on the show yesterday. The reality is, we are talking about people, particularly in the NHS and teachers, who have seen real terms pay cuts over the last 20 years. They were real terms pay cuts in the austerity years. Now, before that time, people said, public sector did really badly under the Osborne and Cameron years. In fact, the private sector done really badly before then. They hadn't had those pay rises because the economy was in a bad state. And then lots of people hit, with the inflation we've had in recent years. These pay rises might look like big pay rises compared to where we are with inflation right now, but they will be still just in a situation where even after these pay rises, they still will be earning less than they did in real terms 20 years ago. Now, that may be the case for a lot of other workers in the private sector, but the reality is we've got a shortage of teachers, got a shortage of nurses and other healthcare workers. Economically, I did, economics at uni, economics 101, supply and demand. You need to increase the supply. How do you do that? Well, put up the wages. Might that actually be the most sensible thing for the government to do?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's certainly true, and that is why the pay review bodies, if they do come up with these recommendations that would be above inflation, because remember, we're expecting inflation of about 3% this year, so 5% would be well above that for pay rises, and that will be the motivation, to get people into teaching, to get people into nursing. The question, is how do we pay for that? I think if the Treasury wants to be smart about this, there is one potential solution, and that's looking at public sector pensions. Most of us in the private sector will be contributing something like 5% into our pensions, and our employer will be putting in similar. But if you take, some NHS workers, they have massive pension contributions of nearly 20%. Yeah. And what the government could say specifically for young people is,
that's just by their employer. They're not putting anything in. It's just by their employer.
Yes, exactly. That is just basically from the government. So the government could say, look, we're already spending this money. If we want to attract people into these professions, why don't we say we'll give you that money up front in the form of a pay rise, and you'll have a much smaller pension contribution. And I think a lot of people would actually take them up on that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
there are other ways to find the money, but it's whether the Treasury wants to.
But the reality, part of the difficulties a lot of departments have got is created by the Chancellor herself. We know when you put up minimum wage, and a lot of people would agree with minimum wage going up to a higher rate that people can actually live on, that you put the minimum wage up, lots of people working in public sector are on minimum wage. When you put up national insurance payments from employers and raise the lower the threshold to the point at which people start paying it, that has been a huge cost for the public sector, not to mention the energy bills as well. So actually there are huge extra costs just to provide services that stand still in the public sector, same as for private businesses, exactly the same. But a lot of that is caused by government policy and Rachel Reeves' own decisions.
Yeah, well, fundamentally, it comes down to how big we want Britain as a state to be. You know, since COVID, we've expected more and more from what the government does. That size has got bigger. Although the tax burden has gone up with it to a record high, the actual individual tax rates are kind of relatively lower than countries with similarly large states. So I think ultimately the decision that is being put off by Reeves and, to be honest, all parties, is if we say we want to keep a state that big, then the basic rate of income tax is going to have to go up by 1 or 2%.
And the rest.
That's what's coming down the line.
And that's the reality. And we talk about the public services like healthcare in an awful lot of European countries. And again, they've got very different, social insurance policies from ours because no one copied the NHS for a reason. But they pay a lot higher basic rate tax, don't we, though? It's all going to be resolved by a new milkshake tax. The sugar tax, apparently, is going to be extended, we're told by the sources in the government, from just fizzy drinks to things like pre-packaged milkshakes and pre-packaged lattes. That's going to solve the obesity crisis and, of course, raise loads of money for the Treasury. Job done, Michael.
Yeah, well, look, it's total nonsense. As we know, there's still plenty of obese people around. Obesity soared during the pandemic. These taxes don't make a difference. All they do is they bring in a little amount of money so that the Chancellor can say, oh, she's met her fiscal rules and she's kept a tiny bit of headroom. It's just putting off the inevitable, which is eventually a government is going to have to make a decision. Do taxes go up massively across the board, or do we decide to shrink the state?
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe we could cut taxes and cut the state. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Michael Simmons, economics editor of The Spectator. Thank you as always for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth, I thought, again, you come from the left. You like a big state on the left, don't you? Think the state is better at doing everything, telling us what we can eat and drink, telling us how to run businesses, telling us how to, live our lives. So you'd want a bigger state, wouldn't you?
Well, I think the sugar tax worked because, Iron Brew changed their recipe in order to avoid
Everyone stopped buying Iron Brew.
And so
they stopped buying Iron Brew.
That's a lot of sugar that people have been saved.
But the thing is, if you don't want to drink... Diet drinks are bigger, by the way, they're bigger in sales than the fizzy drinks with all the real sugar in. You've got an alternative. If you want to drink a high sugar drink, have a high sugar drink. If you don't want to have a high sugar drink, you don't have to buy one. Why does the government have to get involved?
Well, I think price is a big determinant of those things.
Why does the government have to get involved? What's it got to do with the government if someone wants to have a load of sugar hit?
But I think that people will be less likely to do that, and you should encourage
people... What's it got to do with the government?
You should nudge
What's it got to do with the government, what people want to drink?
Well, in this country, it's got a lot to do with the government because you pay for it when they get sick or when they need their teeth doing. So that's...
Well, that's a different argument,
I think
though,
that's
isn't
quite
it?
a reasonable one. On the pay of workers, I think I have a lot of sympathy with people that are struggling to make ends meet on the same jobs that 20 years ago paid a lot better.
The same as the private sector, but they can't afford to give them the pay rises because they've got paying more on national insurance.
Private sector pay rises have been higher in the last couple of years than public sector pay rises. So.
Yeah, but they don't get the pensions. We actually took at the package that people have got.
Totally agree.
That's the reality. Benjamin Butterworth, thank you very much. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about why is Meghan using her HRH, her Royal Highness title, when I thought part of the deal of that, them becoming private citizens in America, no longer working royals, was that she didn't. We'll talk to Angela Levin about that up next. This is Talk.
I mean, what that is downright cowardly on the part of the organisation. They seem unable to face up to the truth, and so they're shooting the messenger. And this is such an ugly part of our institutions now, you know, that I get so many emails from people, including from inside the police, by the way, they're so desperate to reveal things, and yet they're terrified.
On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:52 is the time. So their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, they are still Royal Highnesses, but they're not supposed to use that HRH title since they became non-working royals and moved to the United States for that private life that they have so craved. So why is it then that the HRA title was glimpsed on notepaper used by Meghan Markle in the latest podcast broadcast on YouTube? Let's talk to Angela Levin, who's a royal biographer and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Angela.
Hello.
Thanks for joining. So what was the exact deal about the status of their... They kept their royal titles. I mean, he is a royal prince, he is a duke, she's a duchess. What was the agreement with Buckingham Palace, as far as we know, when they left the palace?
Well, the late Queen, wanted it good enough so they could go in a dignified way. So she didn't take away the... very much, but they wanted this not to be used, because you cannot be a royal and use it for commercial gain.
That's the key thing. Because Diana had her HRH taken away, didn't she? And there was a lot of criticism of the palace for that.
Yes.
Because she was the mother of the future king.
Yes, but she didn't want to be anything with royals. She was very pleased to lose it, actually.
Oh, really?
And was not to have police looking after her. So she wanted to get away and live a different life. So that's not quite the same thing.
Right. But this was about sort of when they did the big, Megxit and left the country, they were going to be, again, live a private life. That hasn't worked out quite as well as many of us would have hoped, certainly on our side of the Atlantic. But I mean, they still use the Duke and Duchess titles, don't they? So what's the difference using the HRH? I mean, look, you know me, I'm a Republican. I don't think anyone is a highness above me or a majesty above me. I don't, no one's below me, no one's above me. We're all equal. But what's the significance of the HRH?
Well, there's loads and loads of duchesses around the place, but they're not people who are royals,
right,
who actually work for the royal family. It's quite simple,
right,
and that's what they agreed to, and they were very pleased about it, because Harry didn't want it anyway. But now, in an extraordinary way of doing it, she did it on a card, delivering to her friend lots of food.
Oh, yeah.
But what's really extraordinary is the Americans don't want any royal family telling them what to do at the, at all. They're not
even how to make bath bombs. I'm obsessed
even
with
how
the bath bombs.
but certainly not politically. They don't want. Meghan's very political, and they don't want that. And as for in the UK, they've been trying to get more friendly with William and Catherine and the King and Queen. So to do this is absolutely going to upset them and make them angry, especially Prince William. So what are they trying to do?
Yeah, what purpose does it serve? Especially, I mean, most Americans wouldn't know the difference anyway. I mean, I don't think most Brits would. You say they're trying to sort of get back in with William and Kate, and that's going to be the absolute key. If William, I mean, Charles has had more relations, more conversations with Harry than William has in recent years, by all accounts, from what we do know. Again, we're not there in the room. But it certainly seems that there is zero relationship left between Harry and Meghan and William and Kate. And given that Harry used to live with William and Kate when they were first married, they were that close, started a charity together and the like. It's very, very sad. Do you think there is any way back while, that's crucially, while Harry's still with Meghan?
No, none at all. Why actually sort of say, no, yeah, I can do it. I don't care what you say. I'm going to, because I'm strong and I can do it. It's like a naughty girl who does exactly what she wants to upset the people around her. And you can't quite work it out why, but that's what she's like. She has to win, and she's full of revenge. So this is what she's doing, which actually is a very bad thing, because it's not going to get her anywhere. As you say, lots of people couldn't care less, but the family that she's attacking do care a lot. It's very important.
These protocols matter to them. Can I ask you also, I mean, the sort of the hatred of Meghan, the criticism of Harry, I mean, they've never some of the accusations against the royal family, they've never actually done anything, been accused of, a crime or anything. Now, I know he's always denied it, but Prince Andrew was actually accused of basically, having sex with a 17-year-old girl on 3 occasions when she was being trafficked by, a convicted child trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein. This, of course, refers to Virginia Giuffre. Now, he's always denied it, although a big settlement was paid in the multi-million-pound settlement with the help of the Queen to Virginia Giuffre. She has sadly now died, believed to be taken her own life. Obviously a very troubled soul, as it would often be the case, we know, with women who have gone through this in their teenage years. There's lots of talk about, people talk about Prince Andrew making a comeback. Does that completely put paid to him coming back at all as a working royal, or was that already a done deal?
Well, I haven't spoken to the King lately. I think that he's finished. I mean, he's over 60. They're not going to put him back. And if she's died, that doesn't mean that he can go back and start getting involved with all sorts of organisations and start taking planes all over the place to...
No one's going to want anything to do with him, are they?
No, absolutely not. But I wonder if he has a guilty conscience about what's happened to Virginia.
He never met her, apparently.
Yeah, well, just that she's a young girl and she was abused, he might feel, this is very sad. I think she loved her children. She had 3 children, but her marriage broke down. And I think it was just too much. And this shows very much to me that anybody who is abused or raped actually needs care.
Exactly. The damage that is done for a lifetime, and we know that, whether it's by multi-billionaires in New York or on an island in the Caribbean or grooming gangs in Rochdale. Royal biographer Angela Levin, thank you very much for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth, give you a final word on this. Meghan and the HRH, do you care about that? Apparently the royal family do.
Oh, well, it's obvious why this happened. The image of the HRH was in a shot for her new podcast, which failed to even chart on Spotify last week.
Oh.
And now this crops up. She's got this podcast about women founders.
Yeah, women founders.
I'm sorry. I mean,
failed actresses who married well.
I was about to say
call it something accurate.
The radical feminist act of marrying a rich man and living off his money. I'm not sure she's a great inspiration.
Nothing says feminist